Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The pine forests of East Texas pressed in on both sides of State Highway 259 as Royce Delaney guided his 18-wheeler through the winding backroads. At 46, Royce had been driving these routes for the better part of 2 decades, hauling everything from lumber to livestock through the thick woods that covered this corner of the state. Unlike the wide-open interstates he'd driven in his younger days, these narrow 2-lane roads demanded constant attention. Deer could leap out at any moment, and the shoulders dropped off sharply into drainage ditches that could swallow a car whole. It was just past 10 p.m. on a humid Thursday night in late September when Royce's engine began making a sound no trucker ever wants to hear, a metallic grinding that started soft but grew louder with each mile. He'd just passed through the tiny town of Dangerfield, and the next real service station was still 40 miles away in Marshall. The temperature gauge was climbing steadily, and wisps of steam were starting to escape from under the hood. Royce knew he had maybe 5 minutes before the engine seized completely. He scanned the dark road ahead for any place to pull off safely. These East Texas backroads were unforgiving. No wide shoulders, no rest areas, just thick forest pressing in on both sides. Then, through the trees, he caught a glimpse of lights. Not the harsh fluorescence of a gas station, but the warm yellow glow of house windows. As he rounded the next curve, he saw it. A gravel driveway leading to what looked like an old farmhouse set back from the road, with several outbuildings and what might be a garage or workshop. The engine gave a particularly violent shudder, making the decision for him. Royce flipped on his hazard lights and carefully maneuvered the big rig onto the gravel drive, praying it would hold the weight. The truck made it about 50 yards before the engine finally gave out with a grinding halt, steam now pouring from under the hood in thick clouds. He was blocking the driveway, but there was no help for it. The truck wasn't going anywhere under its own power. Royce sat in the sudden silence for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness beyond his headlights. The farmhouse was maybe another 100 yards up the drive, a 2-story structure that had seen better days. Paint peeled from the siding, and the wraparound porch sagged in places. But lights glowed warmly in several windows, and smoke drifted from the chimney despite the mild September evening. Someone was definitely home. He grabbed his flashlight and climbed down from the cab, the humid East Texas air immediately making him sweat through his shirt. Crickets and tree frogs created a wall of sound from the surrounding forest. But underneath that natural chorus, he could hear something else. Music drifting from the house. Old music, the kind his grandmother used to play on her record player. Something about it made the hair on his arms stand up, though he couldn't say why. As Royce approached the house, motion sensor lights suddenly blazed to life, temporarily blinding him. When his vision cleared, he found himself looking at a man standing on the porch, having emerged so quietly that Royce hadn't heard the door open. The man was tall and thin, maybe 60 years old, wearing clean overalls and a plaid shirt. His face was deeply lined but clean-shaven, and his eyes were such a pale blue they seemed almost colorless in the harsh light. "Evening," the man said, his voice carrying a deep East Texas drawl. "That your rig, blocking my driveway?" "Yes, sir. I'm real sorry about that," Royce replied, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. "Engine seized up on me. I was hoping I could use your phone to call for a tow, maybe get my company to send another driver to pick up my load." The man studied him for a long moment, those pale eyes unblinking. Then his weathered face split into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Phone lines have been down since that storm last week. Cell service is spotty at best out here. You'd have to drive clear to Marshall to get a decent signal." He gestured toward the truck. "But I might be able to help you with that engine. I'm Virgil Haney, used to work on big rigs before I retired." "Royce Delaney," Royce said, shaking the offered hand. Virgil's grip was firm but cold despite the warm evening. "I'd appreciate any help you could give, but this feels like more than a roadside fix. The whole cooling system's shot." Virgil nodded thoughtfully. "Well, let's have a look at least. But first, you must be thirsty. Come on in. Have some sweet tea while the engine cools down enough to inspect. My daughter Lorene just made a fresh pitcher." Something in Royce's gut told him to politely decline, to walk back to his truck and wait for morning. But that was foolish. These were just country folks, and he'd broken down in their driveway. The least he could do was be neighborly. He followed Virgil up the creaking porch steps and through the front door. The inside of the house was like stepping back in time. Wood-paneled walls were covered with faded photographs in ornate frames. Doilies adorned every surface, and the furniture looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1960s. The music he'd heard was coming from an actual record player in the corner, the vinyl disc spinning lazily. The air was thick with the smell of something cooking, pot roast maybe, mixed with an underlying scent of mothballs and something else, something medicinal and sharp. "Lorene," Virgil called toward this back of the house. "We got company." Footsteps approached from the kitchen, and a woman appeared in the doorway. Royce had expected someone around Virgil's age, but Lorene looked to be in her 30s, with long dark hair and the same pale blue eyes as her father. She wore a simple cotton dress that looked handmade, and her feet were bare. When she smiled, it was warm and genuine in a way her father's hadn't been. "Well, hello there," she said, her voice soft and musical. "Don't get many visitors out this way. You must be the poor soul with the broken-down truck." "Yes, ma'am, Royce Delaney. Sorry to impose on y'all like this." "Nonsense," Lorene said, already moving toward the kitchen. "You're our guest now. I'll get you that tea, and you can tell us all about what brings you through these parts." Royce sat in the offered chair, a high-backed thing that creaked under his weight. Virgil sat across from him, those pale eyes never leaving Royce's face. The silence and stretched uncomfortably until Lorene returned with a tall glass of tea, ice cubes clinking. "So, Mr. Delaney," Virgil said as Royce took a grateful sip of the tea, which was perfectly sweetened and refreshingly cold. "What are you hauling?" "Agricultural equipment," Royce replied. "Heading from Shreveport to Tyler, nothing too valuable or time-sensitive, thankfully." "Agricultural equipment," Virgil repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Funny how things come full circle. This used to be farming country, you know, before the lumber companies bought up most of the land, before the young folks all moved to the cities." Lorene had settled into another chair, her bare feet tucked underneath her. "Daddy likes to reminisce about the old days," she said with a fond smile. "Sometimes I think he wishes we could turn back the clock." "Nothing wrong with remembering better times," Virgil said, his voice taking on an edge. "When families stayed together, when people knew their neighbors, when strangers didn't just pass through without so much as a how do you do." The atmosphere in the room had shifted subtly. Royce took another sip of tea, suddenly aware of how isolated he was. His truck was dead, his phone was useless, and he was miles from the nearest town. "Well," he said, setting down the glass, "I appreciate the hospitality, but maybe we should look at that engine now. I don't want to keep y'all up too late." "Oh, it's early yet," Lorene said with a laugh that sounded slightly off, like she was remembering how laughter was supposed to sound. "We're night owls out here, aren't we, Daddy?" "That we are," Virgil agreed, standing with a groan. "Tell you what, Mr. Delaney, let me grab my tools, and we'll see what we can do about that engine. Lorene, Why don't you show our guests the workshop while I gather what we need?" Before Royce could protest that he could wait by the truck, Lorene was on her feet, gesturing for him to follow. "It's just out back," she said. "Daddy's quite proud of his setup." They walked through the kitchen, which was surprisingly modern compared to the rest of the house, all stainless steel appliances and clean countertops. But Royce noticed something odd. There were no windows. Every window frame had been boarded over from the inside, painted the same white as the walls so it wasn't immediately obvious. When he asked about it, Lorene's laugh was brittle. "Daddy's particular about privacy," she said, "and the morning sun was just too bright for my migraines." They exited through the back door into the humid night. The workshop was a large metal building about 50 yards from the house, well lit and humming with the sound of generators. As they approached, Royce could see through the open doors that it was indeed impressive. Tool chests, hydraulic lifts, and equipment that looked professional grade. But something else caught his eye. A truck parked in the back bay, covered with a tarp. "Daddy works on vehicles for folks sometimes," Lorene explained, following his gaze. "That one's been here a while. The owner never came back for it." She said it casually, but something in her tone made Royce's skin crawl. They entered the workshop, and Royce couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was too clean, for one thing. A working garage should have oil stains, scattered tools, the general disorder of regular use. This looked like it had been scrubbed down with industrial cleaners. The concrete floor was pristine, except for some dark stains near the drain in the center that looked older, ground in deep. "Your father must be quite the mechanic," Royce said, trying to keep his tone conversational. "Oh, he's good with his hands," Lorene replied, running her finger along a workbench. "He can take things apart and put them back together better than anyone. Cars, engines." She paused, meeting his eyes. "All sorts of things." Virgil appeared in the doorway carrying a large toolbox, his tall frame casting a long shadow. "Let's go have a look at your truck, Mr. Delaney. Lorene, why don't you go finish setting up for dinner? Our guest will be hungry after we get his rig sorted out." "But Daddy, I thought—" "Go on now," Virgil said firmly, and Lorene's demeanor changed instantly, becoming almost childlike in her obedience. "Yes, Daddy," she said quietly, hurrying back toward the house. Virgil watched her go, then turned to Royce with that not-quite-right smile. "She's a good girl, my Lorene. Been taking care of me since her mama passed. That was, must be 15 years now. Time does fly." They walked back to Royce's truck, Virgil carrying his tools with surprising ease for a man his age. The engine had cooled enough to open the hood, and Virgil made a show of examining the damage, making thoughtful noises and occasionally asking Royce to try starting it. After about 20 minutes, he straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well, Mr. Delaney, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is your water pump's completely shot, and you've got a cracked head gasket. The good news is I might have the parts in my workshop. The bad news again is it's a good 8-hour job, minimum, and that's if everything goes smooth." Royce's heart sank. 8 hours meant spending the night here, and every instinct he had was screaming at him to get away from this place. Maybe I should just wait for morning, try to get a signal and call for a tow. "Nonsense," Virgil said, his tone brooking no argument. "You can't sleep in that truck with no power. And there's nowhere to walk to from here. Nearest town's 15 miles, and that's if you don't get lost in the woods. We've got a guest room, clean sheets, and Lorene's making her special pot roast. In the morning, we'll get you fixed up and on your way." The rational part of Royce's brain knew the old man was right. Walking 15 miles through unfamiliar forest in the dark was foolish, and sleeping in a dead truck would be miserable. But something about this place, these people, set off every alarm bell he had. "That's very kind, but I don't want to impose—" "No imposition at all," Virgil interrupted. "Truth is, we don't get much company out here. It'd be nice to have someone new to talk to over dinner. Lorene especially. She doesn't meet many people her own age." There was something in the way he said it that made Royce think of Lorene's bare feet, her homemade dress, the way she'd obeyed her father like a scared child rather than a grown woman. He thought of those boarded-up windows and the too-clean workshop with its dark stains by the drain. "I really should stay with my truck," Royce said. "Company policy and all. They've got valuable equipment in that trailer." Virgil's friendly expression faltered for just a moment, his pale eyes going flat and cold. Then the smile returned, wider than before. Of course. Can't be too careful these days. Tell you what, let me at least bring you out some dinner and a lantern, maybe a radio to keep you company. It's going to be a long, dark night otherwise. That would be appreciated, thank you." Virgil headed back toward the house, and Royce immediately climbed back into his cab, locking the doors behind him. He tried his cell phone again. No signal, not even a single bar. The CB radio was dead without engine power. He was completely cut off. Through the windshield he watched the house. Shadows moved past the lit windows, and he could see Virgil and Lorene in what looked like an animated conversation. At one point, Lorene gestured wildly toward the truck, and Virgil grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the window. Royce dug through his cab looking for anything useful. He had a tire iron, a heavy flashlight, a knife in his lunchbox. Not much if things went bad, but better than nothing. He also found an old battery-powered radio in his emergency kit. It crackled to life, picking up nothing but static on most channels, but finally he found a weak signal from a station in Shreveport. Continues for missing truck driver Wallace Henley, who disappeared 3 weeks ago near Dangerfield. His truck was found abandoned on Highway 259 with no sign of struggle. This is the third driver to go missing in East Texas in the past 2 months. State police are asking anyone with information. The radio cut to static as the battery died. Royce's blood ran cold. 3 missing truckers, all in this area. And here he was, broken down in the driveway of an isolated farmhouse with people who made his skin crawl. A knock on the truck door made him jump. Lorene stood outside, holding a tray with a covered plate and a thermos. She was smiling, but in the light from the house, he could see she'd been crying. "Daddy said you wanted to eat out here," she called through the glass. "I brought you dinner." Royce cracked the door just enough to take the tray. "Thank you, Lorene. That's very kind." She lingered, clearly wanting to say something. Finally, she leaned closer and whispered, "You should leave. As soon as you can, you should go." "Lorene!" Virgil's voice cracked like a whip from the porch. "Get back in here. Let the man eat in peace." She flinched and hurried back to the house without another word. Royce watched her go, then looked at the food she'd brought. It smelled amazing. Pot roast with vegetables and fresh bread. His stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since lunch. But after Lorene's warning, he couldn't bring himself to touch it. The hours crawled by in the darkness of the cab. Royce dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound from the forest. Around 2 a.m., he woke to see lights moving through the trees behind the house. Flashlights or lanterns, several of them, moving in a line deeper into the woods. He couldn't make out who was carrying them, but the deliberate way they moved sent chills down his spine. By 3 a.m., exhaustion overtook caution, and Royce fell into a deeper sleep. He dreamed of being underground, surrounded by the smell of earth and decay, trying to claw his way to the surface while someone above laughed and shoveled more dirt onto him. He woke to bright sunlight and someone tapping on his window. Virgil stood there with a steaming mug of coffee and that same unsettling smile. "Morning, Mr. Delaney. Hope you managed some sleep." I've been in the workshop since dawn, and I think I found parts that'll work for your truck." Royce's mouth was dry. His back ached from sleeping in the seat, and he needed to relieve himself desperately. Against his better judgment, he opened the door and climbed down. The morning air was already thick with humidity, promising another scorching East Texas day. "There's a bathroom in the workshop," Virgil said, seeming to read his discomfort. "And Lorene's making breakfast if you're hungry." "Just the bathroom, thanks," Royce said, following Virgil toward the metal building. In the daylight, the property looked less sinister. Just a run-down farmhouse with the usual collection of outbuildings and overgrown fields. But he noticed things he'd missed in the dark, like the fact that all the vehicles he could see, an old pickup, a sedan, even a riding mower, had flat tires, as if they'd been deliberately disabled. And the windows he'd thought were boarded up from inside were actually painted black. Every single one. The workshop bathroom was surprisingly clean, with industrial soap and paper towels. When Royce came out, Virgil was already under his truck's hood, working with practiced efficiency. Despite his unease, Royce had to admit the old man seemed to know what he was doing. "Found a water pump that'll fit with some modification," Virgil said without looking up. "The head gasket's trickier, but I can make something work. Should have you running by afternoon." "I appreciate this, Mr. Haney. What do I owe you?" "We'll settle up when the job's done," Virgil replied. "Why don't you go get some breakfast? Lorene gets upset when folks don't eat her cooking." Royce didn't want to go back to that house, but he also didn't want to antagonize these people when his truck was in pieces. He walked slowly back to the farmhouse, noting details in the daylight. The place had once been well maintained. He could see the ghost of flower gardens, the remains of a painted fence. But neglect had taken over, leaving everything with an air of decay. Lorene was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She looked different in the morning light. Older, more tired, with dark circles under those pale eyes. She managed a smile when she saw him. "Morning, Mr. Delaney. How do you like your eggs?" "Scrambled's fine, thank you." He sat at the kitchen table, noting that here, too, every window was covered. "Lorene, can I ask you something?" She tensed, but nodded. "Last night, you told me I should leave. What did you mean?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, speaking barely above a whisper, she said, "Daddy doesn't like people leaving. He gets upset when they try to go before he says they can." "Has he hurt people?" She turned to face him, and the look in her eyes was answer enough. "He's not a bad man," she said, as if trying to convince herself. "He just gets confused sometimes. Ever since Mama died, he gets confused about who should stay and who should go." "Lorene, those missing truckers? You should eat your breakfast," she interrupted, setting a plate in front of him. "And then you should let Daddy fix your truck, and then you should drive away and never come back. Don't stop for anything, don't look back, and don't ever come this way again." The eggs were perfectly cooked, the toast buttered just right, but Royce could barely swallow past the lump in his throat. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "When I leave, come with me. I can take you somewhere safe." Lorene's laugh was bitter. "There's nowhere safe from Daddy. Besides, someone has to take care of him. He's all I have left." She turned back to the stove. "The others didn't listen when I warned them. They tried to sneak away or fight back. You seem smarter than that, Mr. Delaney, so please, just do what Daddy says, and maybe you'll be the first one to drive away from here." "The first? How many?" The back door slammed open, and Virgil stood there, covered in grease and oil. His pale eyes moved between them, suspicious and cold. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything," he said, his tone making it clear he knew he was. "Just serving Mr. Delaney breakfast, Daddy," Lorene said quickly. "Is the truck fixed?" Getting there, Virgil replied, still staring at Royce. Funny thing, though. I found something interesting in the truck's computer system. Seems Mr. Delaney here triggered a GPS alert when his engine failed. His company knows exactly where he is. Royce tried to keep his face neutral. His company's trucks did have GPS, but the system was notoriously unreliable, especially out in rural areas. Still, if it made Virgil think twice about doing anything stupid... They'll send someone if I don't check in by noon, Royce lied smoothly. Company policy for breakdowns. Virgil nodded slowly. Then we'd better get you fixed up before noon, hadn't we? He smiled, but there was something different about it now. A resignation, maybe, or disappointment. Come on back to the workshop when you're done eating. I could use an extra pair of hands. After he left, Lorene grabbed Royce's arm. He knows you're lying, she whispered urgently. He used to work for a trucking company before Mama died. He knows how the systems work. She glanced toward the door, then pressed something into his hand, a key. For the sedan out front. Tank's full, keys were in the ignition. When you get a chance, run. Don't worry about your truck, just run. What about you? I told you, there's nowhere for me to go. But maybe you can make it. Maybe you can... Lorene! Virgil's voice boomed from outside. Need you out here, girl. She squeezed Royce's hand once, then hurried outside. Through the window, one of the few not painted black, he realized, he could see them by the workshop. Virgil gesticulating angrily while Lorene stood with her head bowed. This was his chance. Royce pocketed the key and moved quickly but quietly to the front door. The sedan was only 50 feet away. If he could get to it, start it, he could be gone before Virgil could stop him. He'd send help back for Lorene, get the police out here. The front door creaked as he opened it, and he froze, listening. No response from the workshop. He stepped onto the porch, then down the steps, walking casually as if just getting some air. The sedan was an old Toyota, dusty but intact except for those flat tires. Wait. The tires. Lorene had said the tank was full, but she hadn't mentioned. He knelt beside the car, heart sinking. The tires hadn't just gone flat. They'd been slashed, all four of them, cut so deeply that no amount of air would help. This car wasn't going anywhere. Clever girl, my Lorene. Virgil's voice came from directly behind him. Royce spun around to find the old man standing there with a tire iron in his hand. She likes to give our guests hope. Says it makes them easier to manage. False hope is better than no hope, she says. Royce stood slowly, calculating distances. He was younger and probably stronger than Virgil, but the old man had a weapon and the advantage of knowing the terrain. Now, Mr. Delaney, Virgil continued conversationally, we can do this easy or hard. Easy is you come back to the workshop, let me finish fixing your truck, and then you drive away and we never see each other again. Hard is what happened to those other fellows who didn't want to be reasonable. You killed them, Royce said. It wasn't a question. Killed is such a harsh word. They just stayed longer than expected. Permanently, you might say. Virgil's smile was genuinely amused now. You know the funny thing about these East Texas woods? They're full of old wells, abandoned mine shafts, places where someone could disappear and never be found. The first fellow, that Henley guy, he's about 300 feet that way. He pointed toward the forest, at the bottom of a well that hasn't seen use since the 1920s. Why? Royce asked, trying to keep him talking while looking for an opening. Why kill random truckers? Random? Virgil laughed. Oh, Mr. Delaney, there's nothing random about it. You all came here. You all broke down right in my driveway. What are the odds of that happening naturally? The implication hit Royce like a punch to the gut. You sabotaged the road. You did something to make trucks break down here. Just a little oil slick in just the right spot, Virgil admitted. Right on that curve about a mile back. Hit it at the wrong angle, which trucks always do because of how the road banks, and it sends a shock through the whole drivetrain. Sometimes causes immediate failure, sometimes takes a few minutes to manifest. Either way, by the time you're looking for a place to pull over, my driveway is the only option. That's insane. Why would you? Because Lorene needs company, Virgil said simply. She gets so lonely out here, just the two of us. After her mama died, she stopped going to town, stopped seeing people. Said she couldn't leave me alone, so I bring people to her. Truckers are perfect. Independent contractors, often alone. Sometimes not missed for days or weeks. But you kill them. Only the ones who try to leave wrong, Virgil corrected. I give everyone the same chance. Let me fix your truck, be polite to my daughter, and you can go. But some folks, they get scared. They try to run, they threaten us. Those ones have to stay. And how many have you let go? Royce challenged. Virgil's silence was answer enough. So no one actually gets to leave, Royce said. Well, you could be the first, Virgil offered, though his grip on the tire iron suggested otherwise. Your truck really is almost fixed. Another hour or two and you could drive out of here. All you have to do is play along, be nice to Lorene, pretend you believe we're just helpful country folk. It was a lie, Royce knew. Virgil had no intention of letting him leave, not after revealing all this. But maybe if he played along, he could find another opportunity. Okay, Royce said, raising his hands in surrender. Okay, let's go fix the truck. Virgil studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Smart man, come on then. They walked back toward the workshop, Virgil staying behind him, the tire iron never wavering. As they passed the house, Royce saw Lorene watching from the kitchen window. She looked resigned, defeated, like she'd seen this play out before and knew how it would end. In the workshop, Virgil directed him to help with the engine repairs, always keeping the tire iron within reach. The old man really did know his way around an engine. Under different circumstances, Royce would have been impressed. They worked mostly in silence, the only sounds the clanking of tools and the distant hum of generators. After an hour, Virgil straightened up. Need a specific gasket for my storage. It's in the back room there, he pointed to a door Royce hadn't noticed before. Come help me find it. Every instinct screamed danger, but with Virgil holding that tire iron, Royce had no choice. He walked to the door, Virgil close behind, and opened it. The smell hit him first. Decay, earth, and something chemical like formaldehyde. The room was larger than expected, extending back into darkness, but in the beam of Virgil's flashlight, Royce could see shapes along the walls. It took his brain a moment to process what he was seeing. Bodies, or what had been bodies. 3 of them, in various states of preservation, propped up in chairs like they were having a tea party. They were dressed in clean clothes, their hair combed, their faces. Royce's stomach heaved. Their faces had been preserved somehow, painted or treated to look almost alive. The ones who wouldn't cooperate, Virgil said, conversationally. Lorene likes to have tea with them sometimes. Helps with her loneliness. That one there is Henley. He pointed to the freshest-looking corpse. And that's Morrison, and that's Kowalski. Good men, all of them, just not very understanding about our situation. Royce couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This was madness beyond anything he'd imagined. Now, Virgil continued, raising the tire iron. The question is, are you going to join them, or are you going to be reasonable? Royce's mind raced through options as he stood frozen in that chamber of horrors. 3 preserved corpses stared at him with their painted eyes, while Virgil waited behind him with the tire iron. The smell was overwhelming. Death mixed with chemicals and the musty scent of disturbed earth. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the flashlight's beam, water dripped steadily, the sound echoing in what must be a much larger space than initially appeared. "I asked you a question, Mr. Delaney," Virgil said patiently. "Are you going to be reasonable?" "Yes," Royce managed to croak out. "Yes, I'll be reasonable." "Good man. Now, here's what's going to happen. We're going to finish fixing your truck together. Then you're going to have dinner with Lorene and me, a nice family meal. After that, well, we'll see how things go." They backed out of the storage room, Virgil pulling the door shut with a sound that seemed far too final. Back in the main workshop, Royce's hands shook as he tried to continue working on the engine. His mind kept replaying what he'd seen. Those bodies, positioned like dolls, their dead faces made up to look alive. And Lorene had tea with them. Sweet, sad Lorene, who had tried to warn him, was just as insane as her father. "You're wondering about Lorene," Virgil said, reading his expression. "Whether she's part of this or a victim." Royce said nothing, focusing on tightening a bolt. "She's both," Virgil continued. "After her mama died, Lorene just broke. Started talking to her mama like she was still there, setting her place at dinner, leaving her bedroom exactly as it was. The doctors wanted to institutionalize her, but I couldn't let them take my baby girl. So I brought her home, and I've been taking care of her ever since. By killing truckers. By giving her what she needs," Virgil corrected sharply. "Company, stability. The illusion that the world hasn't changed, that people still visit, still care. Those men in there, they're her friends now. They'll never leave her, never abandon her like her mama did." The twisted logic of it made Royce's skin crawl. She knows they're dead. Part of her knows, but part of her doesn't. And that's the part that keeps her functioning. That's the part that can still smile, still cook breakfast, still pretend everything is normal. Virgil's voice took on a defensive tone. "I'm keeping my daughter alive the only way I know how." They worked in tense silence for another hour. The engine was actually coming together. Virgil hadn't been lying about his mechanical skills. Under different circumstances, Royce would have been grateful for the help. Now, he just wanted to survive long enough to get away from this nightmare. "There," Virgil finally said, stepping back. "Try starting her up." Royce climbed into the cab, turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, running smooth and strong. Relief and terror warred in his chest. The truck worked, but would he actually be allowed to leave in it? "Sounds good," Virgil called up. "Now shut her down and come inside for lunch. Lorene's been cooking all morning." "I should really get going. I insist." The tire iron was back in Virgil's hand, casual but present. "Besides, you need to let the engine run for a bit, make sure the repair holds. What's another hour or two?" They walked to the house, Royce acutely aware of Virgil behind him. Inside, the dining room table was set for 4. 4 plates, 4 sets of silverware, 4 glasses. Lorene stood by the table in a different dress, this one with tiny flowers printed on it, her hair freshly brushed and pinned back. "Oh, good, you're just in time," she said brightly, but her eyes were red-rimmed, puffy from crying. "I made chicken and dumplings, Mama's recipe." That's when Royce noticed the 4th chair wasn't empty. A woman's dress was draped over it, arranged as if someone was wearing it. A wig of gray hair was positioned where a head would be. A pair of glasses rested on the table in front of the place setting. "Mama, this is Mr. Delaney," Lorene said to the empty dress. "He's the trucker Daddy's been helping." Virgil sat down casually, as if this was perfectly normal. He gestured for Royce to take the remaining chair. Having no choice, Royce sat, trying not to stare at the grotesque tableau. "Mama's feeling quiet today," Lorene explained as she served the food. "She gets like that sometimes." The chicken and dumplings smelled delicious, but Royce could barely force himself to take a bite. Across from him, Lorene ate mechanically, occasionally glancing at the empty dress as if listening to something only she could hear. Virgil ate with apparent appetite, watching Royce with those pale, unblinking eyes. "Tell me about your family, Mr. Delaney," Virgil said suddenly. "Wife? Kids?" "Divorced," Royce lied. He actually had a wife and 2 teenage sons in Tyler, but he didn't want these people knowing anything real about his life. "No kids. That's a shame," Lorene said softly. "Children are such a blessing, aren't they, Mama?" She looked at the empty dress, then nodded as if receiving an answer. "Mama says children keep you grounded, give you purpose." Lorene always wanted children of her own, Virgil added. But after her mama passed, well, she couldn't leave me alone to start her own family. Such a devoted daughter. The best daughter, Lorene agreed. But there was something hollow in her voice. "I could never leave Daddy, or Mama." The meal continued in surreal normalcy. Virgil discussing the weather, Lorene occasionally addressing the empty dress, Royce trying to eat enough to avoid suspicion while his stomach churned with anxiety. Through the window, he could see his truck parked outside, so close yet impossibly far away. Finally, the meal ended. Lorene began clearing the dishes, humming tunelessly. Virgil leaned back in his chair, studying Royce. "You did well," he said quietly. Not everyone can handle Lorene's peculiarities with such grace. "She needs help," Royce said, matching his low tone. "Professional help." "She needs her family," Virgil countered. "And the friends we provide for her. The dead truckers, you mean. They're not dead to her. In her mind, they're just very quiet guests who never leave." Virgil stood. "Come on, let's test that engine properly. Take her for a spin down the driveway and back." This was it, his chance. Once he was in the truck, he could floor it, crash through any barrier they might have at the end of the driveway, get to the main road. But Virgil was already shaking his head, reading his thoughts. "I'll be riding with you, of course, just to make sure everything's running smooth." They walked to the truck, Virgil climbing into the passenger seat before Royce could object. The tire iron rested across his lap, a clear threat. "Go ahead," Virgil said. "Start her up." Royce turned the key, and the engine purred to life. He put it in gear and slowly drove down the gravel driveway. About 100 yards from the house, Virgil told him to stop. "See that?" He pointed to a gap in the trees. "That's the old logging road. Goes about 2 miles back into the forest before it dead ends at the old Haney family cemetery. That's where Lorene's mama is buried, where I'll be buried someday." He paused. "Where those fellows in the workshop will be buried, once Lorene doesn't need them anymore." "And me?" Royce asked. "Am I going to end up in that cemetery?" Virgil was quiet for a long moment. "I haven't decided yet. You're different from the others. You didn't panic, didn't try to fight right away. You were kind to Lorene even after you knew something was wrong. That counts for something. Then let me go. I'll drive away and never tell anyone about this place. You know I can't do that. You've seen too much. The only question is whether you leave vertical or horizontal." Virgil pointed back toward the house. "Turn around, let's go back." As Royce turned the truck around, he noticed something. Fresh tire tracks leading onto that logging road. Multiple sets, recent. Someone else had been here, and recently. Back at the house, Virgil directed him to park the truck but didn't take the keys. "Leave it running," he said. I want to check something in the engine." They both got out, and Virgil popped the hood again, peering inside. Royce stood beside him, trying to look interested while actually scanning for any opportunity to run. That's when he heard it. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Virgil heard them too. His face went pale, then flushed with anger. "What did you do?" "Nothing, But Virgil was already moving, faster than Royce would have thought possible for his age. The tire iron swung through the air, and Royce barely ducked in time. He stumbled backward and Virgil advanced, raising the weapon again. The sirens were definitely closer now, multiple vehicles from the sound of it. Virgil's eyes darted between Royce and the road, calculating. "Laureen," he shouted, "get out here, we need to go." The front door burst open, and Laureen appeared. But she wasn't alone. Behind her were 2 Texas state troopers, their hands on their weapons. "Step away from him, Mr. Haney," one of them commanded. "Drop the tire iron." Virgil froze, the weapon still raised. "You called them," he said to Laureen, his voice full of betrayal. "You called them." "I'm sorry, Daddy," Laureen said, tears streaming down her face. "But I couldn't let you hurt anyone else. Mr. Delaney doesn't deserve to end up like the others." "They were for you," Virgil shouted. "Everything I did was for you." "I know, Daddy, I know." Laureen stepped forward, her hands raised placatingly. "But Mama wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want us to hurt people." "Mama's dead," Virgil screamed. And in that moment his careful control shattered completely. "She's been dead for 15 years, and you won't accept it. You sit at that table talking to empty air, setting places for ghosts, and I'm the crazy one?" More police vehicles pulled into the driveway. State troopers, local sheriff's deputies, even an ambulance. Officers surrounded Virgil, who dropped the tire iron and fell to his knees, sobbing. "I just wanted to keep her happy," he wept. "I just wanted my little girl to smile again." As the police took Virgil into custody, one of the troopers approached Royce. "Mr. Delaney, your company reported you missing when you didn't check in. They gave us your last GPS coordinates. When we couldn't reach you, we came to investigate." So his lie about the GPS had been partially true. The company had been tracking him. The irony wasn't lost on him. "There are bodies," Royce said numbly, "in the workshop, in a back room." The trooper's expression darkened. "We know. Ms. Haney told us everything when we arrived. She's been wanting to report this for years, but couldn't bring herself to turn in her father. When she saw you this morning, saw that you were different from the others, that you didn't try to sneak away or threaten them, she finally found the courage to call." Royce looked at Laureen, who was being led to a different police car than her father. She wasn't under arrest, the trooper explained, but would need psychiatric evaluation and extensive therapy. As she passed Royce, she stopped. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being kind, for offering to take me with you. No one else ever did that. Will you be okay?" She smiled sadly. "I don't know, but at least now I have a chance to find out. The others, Henley, Morrison, Kowalski, they didn't get that chance. At least their families will have closure now." As the police vehicles left with Virgil and Laureen, Royce stood alone by his repaired truck. The engine was still running, purring smoothly thanks to Virgil's skilled work. The irony of it, saved by the man who'd planned to kill him, fixed by hands that had murdered at least 3 other truckers. A detective approached him. "We'll need a full statement, Mr. Delaney, but that can wait until tomorrow." "You're free to go. What about my truck? Is it evidence?" "We've documented everything we need. You can take it." Royce climbed into the cab, his hands shaking as he gripped the wheel. The truck that had brought him into this nightmare would now carry him away from it. He put it in gear and slowly drove down the driveway, past the workshop where 3 dead men had been kept as macabre companions, past the house where a broken family had lived in a twisted fantasy. As he reached the main road, he stopped and looked back. The farmhouse looked peaceful in the late afternoon sun, just another old building slowly being reclaimed by the East Texas forest. No one passing by would guess at the horrors it had contained. Royce drove for 2 hours before stopping, his nerves too frayed to continue safely. He pulled into a well-lit truck stop near Marshall, one bustling with activity and normalcy. The bright fluorescent lights, the smell of diesel and coffee, the chatter of other drivers, it all felt surreal after what he'd experienced. He called his dispatcher first, explaining briefly that he'd had engine trouble and been delayed but was now back en route. The full story would come later, filtered through police reports and official statements. Then he called his wife. "Hey, honey," he said when she answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Royce, thank God. The company called and said you were missing. I've been worried sick." "I'm okay. Engine trouble in a bad spot, but I'm okay now." "You sound strange. Are you sure you're all right?" He wasn't, might never be again, but he said, "Yeah, just tired. I'll be home tomorrow. Tell the boys I love them." "We love you too. Drive safe." After hanging up, Roy sat in his truck for a long time, watching other drivers come and go. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the darkness that could lurk just off the main roads. He thought about Laureen, broken by grief and isolation, turned into something barely functional by her father's twisted love. He thought about Virgil, so desperate to help his daughter that he'd become a monster. And he thought about those 3 dead truckers, men just like him who'd had the bad luck to break down in the wrong place. The next day, after giving his statement to the police, Royce learned more about what had been happening at the Haney farm. Investigators found human remains in the old well Virgil had mentioned, not just the 3 recent victims, but others going back years. Laureen's mother was the only one legitimately buried in the family cemetery. The rest were people who had visited over the years and never left. Laureen, it turned out, had been calling anonymous tip lines for months, trying to work up the courage to report her father. She'd hang up before saying anything, but the calls had been logged. The morning Royce arrived, something about his kindness, his offer to take her with him, had finally given her the strength to go through with it. She'd called 911 while Virgil was in the workshop with Royce, telling them everything. The oil slick on the road that caused trucks to break down was confirmed by investigators. Virgil had been very selective, only targeting solitary truckers, only during certain weather conditions when the oil would be most effective, spacing the incidents months apart to avoid pattern detection. It was horrifyingly well planned. 3 weeks later, Royce received a letter forwarded through his company. It was from Laureen, writing from a psychiatric facility in Dallas. "Dear Mr. Delaney, I wanted to thank you again for your kindness that day. I know what you saw must have been terrifying, and I'm sorry you had to experience it. But you should know that you saved me, not just by being there when I finally found the courage to call for help, but by treating me like a person even when you knew something was very wrong. The doctors here are helping me understand what happened to me after Mama died. They say I developed something called complicated grief disorder, along with other issues. Daddy meant well, but his way of helping me only made things worse. The men he killed, I knew they were dead, but I also didn't know, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain the splitting that happened in my mind. I think about Mr. Henley, Mr. Morrison, and Mr. Kowalski every day. Their families have been notified, and they can finally have proper burials. I've written letters to their families, though I don't know if they'll ever read them. How do you apologize for something like this? Daddy is in prison now. They say he'll never get out, and maybe that's for the best. He's sick too, in his own way. The prosecutor wanted me to testify against him, but I couldn't. Despite everything, he's still my father, and in his twisted way, everything he did was out of love for me. I don't know what my future holds. The doctors say I'll need years of therapy, maybe lifetime support. But for the first time since Mama died, I have hope that I might have a future at all. Thank you for being the catalyst for change. Thank you for seeing me as someone worth saving, even in the middle of your own terror. I hope you're back with your family, safe and surrounded by love. I hope the nightmares fade. I hope you can still drive those roads without fear. With gratitude, Laureen. Royce read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and putting it in his wallet. He'd carry it with him on future runs, a reminder that even in the darkest situations, kindness could make a difference. But he never drove Highway 259 again. The company understood, rerouting him to other territories without question. The official reason was trauma from the incident, but Royce knew it was more than that. It was the knowledge that every small town, every isolated farmhouse, every helpful stranger could be hiding something monstrous. The safe, predictable world of highways and truck stops had been forever tainted by his glimpse behind the curtain of normalcy. 6 months after the incident, Royce was driving through Oklahoma when he heard a news report on the radio. Virgil Haney had been found dead in his cell, apparent suicide. He'd left a note that simply said, "I'm going to be with Mama now. Take care of Laureen." Royce pulled over at the next rest stop and sat quietly for a moment. He felt no satisfaction at Virgil's death, only a deep sadness for the whole tragic situation. A family destroyed by grief, multiple innocent lives lost, all because one man couldn't let go and seek proper help for his daughter's mental illness. He thought about calling Laureen, but what would he say? Instead, he made a donation to a mental health charity in her name and continued his route. A year later, Royce was training a new driver, a young man named Carlos who was eager to learn the routes through East Texas. As they approached the area where Highway 259 curved through the pine forests, Carlos noticed Royce tensing up. "You okay, boss?" "Yeah," Royce said, then reconsidered. "Actually, Carlos, let me tell you something. This job will take you to a lot of places, most of them perfectly safe. But sometimes, very rarely, you might find yourself in a situation that doesn't feel right. Trust that feeling. Don't worry about being rude or seeming paranoid. If something feels wrong, get out." Speaking from experience? Royce thought about the Haney farmhouse, about Virgil's pale eyes and tire iron, about Laureen's tears and the dressed-up corpses in the workshop. "Yeah," he said simply. "Experience." They drove in silence for a while, the pine trees pressing close on both sides of the road. Then Carlos asked, "That thing in the news last year about the trucker murders near Dangerfield, were you involved in that?" Royce glanced at him. The kid had done his homework. "I was the last one, the one who got away." Man, that must have been terrifying. It was. But you know what the scariest part was? How normal they seemed at first. Just helpful country folks with a broken daughter and too much grief. The monster doesn't always look like a monster, Carlos. Sometimes it looks like someone's grandfather. Sometimes it offers you sweet tea and fixes your truck. Carlos was quiet for a moment, digesting this. Then he asked, "Do you think the daughter, Laureen, do you think she was evil too?" Royce considered the question. No, not evil. Broken, used, trapped. Her father's victim as much as those dead truckers were. Maybe more so because she had to live with it every day. He paused. "I heard she's doing better. Living in a halfway house now, working at a library, trying to build some kind of normal life. Could you forgive someone like that? Someone who knew people were being killed and didn't stop it?" "I don't know if forgiveness is mine to give," Royce said. "That's for the families of the dead to decide. But I can understand how someone can be so damaged, so controlled, that they lose the ability to make right choices. And I can hope they find healing." They passed the exit for Ranch Road 2886, the one that led to the Haney farm. Royce didn't mention it to Carlos, but he noticed. In his peripheral vision, he caught a glimpse of the old farmhouse in the distance, now abandoned and slowly being reclaimed by the forest. The windows were broken, the roof starting to cave in. Nature was erasing the evidence of what had happened there, but the memory would live on in police files, in nightmares, in the hearts of grieving families. 5 years after that night at the Haney farm, Royce retired from trucking. His sons had graduated college, his wife was ready for him to be home more, and he'd saved enough to live comfortably. At his retirement party, fellow drivers asked him to share his wildest story from the road. He could have told them about the ice storm in Montana that nearly sent him off a cliff, or the time he'd helped deliver a baby at a rest stop in Arizona, or any number of close calls and strange encounters from 25 years on the road. Instead, he raised his beer and said, "Here's to all the drivers who didn't make it home. Here's to the ones whose stories we'll never know. And here's to getting home safe, every single time." They toasted, not knowing the weight behind his words. Later that night, his wife found him on the porch, looking at the stars. "You're thinking about that family again, aren't you?" she said. "The ones from East Texas." He'd told her everything, eventually. Had to explain the nightmares, the sudden anxiety at certain triggers, the smell of pot roast, the sound of old music on vinyl, the sight of abandoned farmhouses. "I got a letter," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "From Lorene." His wife sat beside him as he opened it. The handwriting was steadier than before, the message brief. "Mr. Delaney, 5 years of therapy, medication and hard work. 5 years of facing what I allowed to happen, what I participated in through my silence and compliance. I don't expect forgiveness. I haven't even forgiven myself. But I wanted you to know that I volunteer now with a group that helps families of missing persons. I tell them the truth about their loved ones when I can. Help them find closure. I also wanted you to know that the 3 men, Mr. Henley, Mr. Morrison, and Mr. Kowalski, have all been properly buried by their families. I attend their graves every year on the anniversaries of their deaths. Sometimes family members are there. Some speak to me, some don't. I respect whatever they need. I'm including a photo of the memorial that was erected at the site of our old farm. The state bought the property and turned it into a small memorial park. It lists the names of all the victims found there, 11 in total, going back 20 years. Daddy had been doing this long before Mama died. Her death just changed his methods. I hope you've found peace. I hope the roads feel safe again. I hope your family knows how lucky they are to have you come home. Lorene, P.S. They're making a documentary about what happened. They want to interview me, but I wanted to check with you first. You were the one who survived. Your story matters most. Attached was a photo of a simple stone memorial with 11 names carved into it. At the bottom was inscribed, "For those who traveled far from home and never returned. May their memories guide us toward light." "Will you do it?" his wife asked. "The documentary?" Royce thought for a long moment. "Maybe. If it helps prevent something like this from happening again. If it helps other drivers recognize the warning signs. And Lorene. She should tell her story too. The whole truth of it, the mental illness, the control, the fear, all of it. People need to understand how someone can be both victim and accomplice." They sat together in comfortable silence. the Texas night warm around them. Somewhere out there, truckers were driving through the darkness, carrying their loads along empty highways, past isolated farmhouses and through sleeping towns. Most would complete their journeys without incident, but a few might encounter something that didn't feel right, and maybe, just maybe, they'd remember to trust their instincts and get to safety. "I'm glad you came home," his wife said softly. "Me too," Royce replied, taking her hand. "Me too." The documentary aired 2 years later. The Last Exit, the Haney Farm murders, won several awards and led to increased safety protocols for truckers, including mandatory GPS tracking and regular check-in requirements. Royce participated, as did Lorene, though they were interviewed separately. In the film, Lorene said something that stayed with viewers. "Evil isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's a slow slide into darkness, one small compromise at a time, until you look around and realize you're in hell and you don't remember the way out. My father created a hell trying to build me a heaven. Mr. Delaney was the first person in years to offer me a door. I'm grateful I finally had the courage to walk through it." The Haney farmhouse was demolished shortly after the documentary aired. The memorial park expanded to cover the entire property. Pine trees were planted in rows, one for each victim. As they grew, they would eventually hide all traces of the buildings that once stood there, leaving only forest and memory. Royce visited once, years after his retirement, driving his pickup truck along the old route he'd once traveled in his 18-wheeler. He stopped at the memorial, read the names, left flowers for each of the dead. As he turned to leave, he saw another figure approaching, Lorene, older now, her hair gray at the temples, but looking healthier than he'd ever seen her. They stood together in silence for a moment, two survivors of a nightmare that had consumed so many others. "Thank you for coming," she said finally. "Thank you for calling for help," he replied. They didn't embrace, didn't shake hands. The chasm between them was too vast for such simple gestures. But they nodded to each other, an acknowledgement of shared trauma and mutual survival, before going their separate ways. Royce drove home along Highway 259, through the pine forests of East Texas, past new houses and old farms, past places where other stories were unfolding. Some ordinary, some perhaps as dark as what had happened at the Haney place. But he wasn't afraid anymore. The road was just a road. The darkness was just darkness. The desert heat still radiated from the asphalt, even though the sun had set 3 hours ago. Harlan McCade kept his 18-wheeler at a steady 70 miles per hour along Highway 83, following the serpentine path that roughly paralleled the Rio Grande through some of the most desolate country in South Texas. At 54, Harlan had been running these border routes for almost 30 years, watching small towns dry up and blow away, while the drug war ebbed and flowed like a tide that never quite receded. Tonight's run was routine, a load of construction supplies from San Antonio to a development project in Laredo. Nothing special, nothing that should have attracted attention. But as Harlan passed through the ghost town of Catarina, his headlights caught something that made him ease off the accelerator. There, pulled off on the shoulder about a quarter-mile ahead, sat another 18-wheeler. Not unusual in itself, except for two things. The trailer doors were standing wide open, and there wasn't a soul in sight. Harlan slowed further as he approached, his experienced eyes taking in details. It was a Freightliner Cascadia, maybe 5 years old, white cab with no company markings he could see. Texas plates. The engine was off, no lights except the mandatory markers. The open trailer doors swayed slightly in the desert wind, revealing nothing but darkness inside. What bothered him most was the position. The truck was parked neatly on the shoulder, not at an angle like it had mechanical trouble, but deliberately placed, as if the driver had simply decided to stop and walk away. He pulled his own rig to a stop about 50 feet behind the abandoned truck and grabbed his heavy flashlight, leaving his engine running. The CB radio crackled with static, but no chatter, unusual for this time of night when drivers often kept each other company through the lonely hours. Harlan tried raising anyone on Channel 19. Breaker 19, this is Road Dog southbound on 83 near Katerina. Anybody know about this abandoned rig at mile marker 447? Over. Static was his only answer. He tried again on Channel 9, the emergency frequency, with the same result. Either nobody was monitoring or nobody wanted to respond. Neither option was comforting. Harlan climbed down from his cab, flashlight in one hand, tire iron in the other. A precaution learned from 3 decades of night driving through territory where bad things sometimes happen to solitary travelers. The desert silence was absolute except for the distant idle of his own engine. No insects, no coyotes, even the ever-present wind had stilled. It was the kind of quiet that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. He approached the abandoned truck cautiously, sweeping his flashlight across the ground. No skid marks, no signs of struggle, no broken glass or debris. The driver's door was closed but unlocked. Harlan pulled it open, the hinges creaking in the silence. The cab was neat, organized, like the driver had just stepped out for a moment. Keys still in the ignition. Logbook on the dash showing the last entry 3 days ago. Departure from Houston with a load bound for El Paso. A half-empty bottle of water in the cup holder, still condensing in the residual cool from the air conditioning that must have been running not long ago. But it was what he found on the passenger seat that made Harlan's blood run cold. A wallet open to show a commercial driver's license. The photo showed a Hispanic man in his 40s, serious expression, professional. The name read Miguel Reyes, but it was the business card tucked into the wallet that caught Harlan's attention. Deputy Ephraim Colton, Dimmitt County Sheriff's Department. Harlan knew that name. Colton was something of a legend along the border routes, one of the few cops the truckers genuinely respected. Straight arrow, never took bribes, had a reputation for actually helping drivers in trouble instead of just looking for violations to ticket. If Reyes had Colton's card, it meant they'd had contact. And if this was Reyes's truck sitting abandoned in the middle of nowhere, something had gone very wrong. He walked to the back of the trailer, playing his flashlight into the dark interior. Empty. Completely empty, which was wrong in itself. According to the logbook, Reyes had been hauling a full load. The trailer floor showed scratches and scuff marks indicating recent cargo, but whatever had been here was gone now. Harlan climbed up into the trailer, his footsteps echoing in the metal box. That's when he noticed the smell, faint but unmistakable. Blood. Not much, but enough to leave a lingering metallic tang in the air. His flashlight beam caught dark stains on the floor near the front of the trailer. Definitely blood, partially cleaned but not thoroughly enough. Someone had tried to cover something up here. Harlan backed out of the trailer quickly, his instincts screaming at him to get back in his truck and drive away. But the thought of Miguel Reyes, a fellow trucker whose face he'd just seen in that license photo, kept him from running. He pulled out his cell phone. 1 bar of signal, barely enough. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he wanted. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Colton here." "Deputy Colton, this is Harlan McCade. I'm a trucker, and I'm out on Highway 83 near Katerina. I found an abandoned rig that belongs to a driver named Miguel Reyes. Your business card was in his wallet." There was a long pause. When Colton spoke again, his voice was sharp, alert. "McCade, you said? Where exactly are you?" "Mile marker 447. southbound shoulder. The truck's been here at least a few hours, maybe more. Trailer's empty, but there's blood. Stop talking, Colton interrupted. Get back in your truck right now and drive away. Don't stop until you reach the truck stop in Carrizo Springs. I'll meet you there in an hour. Deputy, what's going... Mr. McCade, I need you to trust me. You're in danger just being there. Get in your truck and go. Now. The urgency in Colton's voice sent Harlan jogging back to his rig. He climbed in, released the brakes, and pulled back onto the highway, watching his mirrors nervously. As he accelerated away from the abandoned truck, he caught a glimpse of headlights in the distance behind him, approaching fast with no running lights, just the white glare of high beams. He pushed harder on the accelerator. The truck stop in Carrizo Springs was a welcome sight. Bright lights, other trucks, people, normal civilization. Harlan parked and went inside, ordering coffee he didn't want just to have something to do with his hands while he waited. He kept watching the door, jumping every time it opened. Deputy Ephraim Colton arrived 53 minutes after their phone call. He was exactly what Harlan had expected from his reputation. Tall, lean, weathered face that had seen too much sun and too many bad situations. Maybe 60 years old, with gray hair cut military short and eyes that missed nothing. He wore civilian clothes but moved like a cop, scanning the room before approaching Harlan's booth. "Mr. McCade," he said, sliding into the opposite seat. "Tell me everything you saw. Don't leave out any details." Harlan recounted his discovery, watching Colton's face grow increasingly grim. When he finished, the deputy was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Miguel Reyes was working with me," he finally said. "Unofficially. He was helping track something, and now he's missing." He pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages. 3 days ago, he called me from Houston. Said he'd been approached to haul a special load, off the books, cash payment. The kind of thing that's usually drugs or human cargo. But the pay was wrong. Too high for drugs, too low for people. He thought it might be weapons. Was it? I don't know. He was supposed to check in with me every 6 hours, let me know his position, what he was seeing. Last contact was 2 days ago when he passed through Uvalde. Said everything seemed normal, just a sealed load with instructions not to open it for any reason. Colton's jaw tightened. I should have told him to refuse the job, but we needed to know what was being moved through our territory. You think someone found out he was informing? That's exactly what I think. And now you've seen his truck, which means you're a witness to whatever happened. Colton leaned forward. "Mr. McCade, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Will anyone know you stopped there? Did you tell dispatch, family, anyone?" Harlan shook his head. "Just you. Good. Keep it that way. There are people moving things through South Texas who don't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way. Reyes found that out, and I don't want you to be next. Shouldn't we report this to who?" Colton interrupted. "Half the agencies down here are compromised. Border Patrol, State Police, even some of my own department. Money flows across that border in both directions, and it buys a lot of blind eyes." He stood. "I'm going to check out that truck, see if there's anything that tells us what happened to Miguel. You're going to continue your run to Laredo and forget you ever saw anything. Understood?" Harlan wanted to protest, but the look in Colton's eyes stopped him. This was bigger than just an abandoned truck. "What about Reyes's family?" "No family. That's why he was willing to take these risks." Colton pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. "That's my personal cell. If anyone approaches you about this, if you see anything unusual, you call me immediately. And Mr. McCade, be careful. These people have eyes everywhere." Colton left, and Harlan sat nursing his cold coffee for another 20 minutes before returning to his truck. The drive to Laredo was uneventful, but he couldn't shake the image of that abandoned rig, doors open to the desert night, blood on the trailer floor. Somewhere out there, Miguel Reyes was either dead or wishing he was. He made his delivery in Laredo the next morning and picked up a return load to San Antonio, produce from the Mexican farms that fed half of Texas. It was a familiar run, one he'd made hundreds of times, but today, everything felt different. Every vehicle that lingered too long in his mirrors made him nervous. Every unmarked road leading into the brush reminded him that people disappeared out here all the time. He was about 30 miles north of Laredo when he noticed the helicopter. It was flying low, parallel to the highway, the kind of black, unmarked aircraft that could belong to any of a dozen agencies or none of them. It stayed with him for 5 miles before veering off to the west, disappearing into the heat haze. Harlan told himself it was nothing, just border surveillance, routine, but his hands were sweating on the wheel. That evening, he stopped at a truck stop in Cotulla to fuel up and grab dinner. While he was eating, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your trailer." Harlan's blood ran cold. He abandoned his half-eaten meal and walked quickly to his truck, circling it carefully. Everything looked normal, seals intact, no signs of tampering. But when he climbed up and opened the trailer doors, his flashlight illuminated something that shouldn't have been there. A cardboard box, about the size of a filing cabinet, sitting among the pallets of produce. It hadn't been there when he'd loaded in Laredo. He'd supervised that personally. He climbed into the trailer and approached the box cautiously. No markings, no labels, just plain brown cardboard sealed with tape. His phone buzzed again. "Deliver as normal, no stops, no inspection, $50K in your account tomorrow." $50,000, more than he made in a year, all for delivering one unmarked box that someone had somehow placed in his sealed trailer without him knowing. Harlan stood there in the dark trailer, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand, knowing he was standing at a crossroads. Take the money and become part of whatever had gotten Miguel Reyes killed, or refuse and potentially become the next trucker to disappear along the border routes. He pulled out Deputy Colton's card and dialed the personal number. "This is McCade. Someone put something in my trailer. They're offering me money to deliver it." There was a pause. Then Colton's voice tense. "Where are you?" "Cotulla truck stop." "Don't move. Don't touch the box. I'm 40 minutes away." "And McCade?" "There are probably eyes on you right now, so act natural. Go back inside, finish your dinner, make it look like you're following their instructions." Harlan closed the trailer, trying to look casual, and walked back into the truck stop. Every face seemed suspicious now, every glance potentially surveillance. He forced himself to eat, though the food tasted like cardboard. His phone buzzed again. "Why did you make a call?" They were watching. Listening, maybe. Harlan typed back, "Calling dispatch about delivery time." A minute later, "No more calls. Drive now." But Harlan didn't move. He sat in that booth, pretending to eat, watching the clock. 20 minutes, 30. Other truckers came and went, none paying him any special attention, but he knew someone was watching. Had to be. After 35 minutes, he saw Colton's unmarked car pull into the lot, followed by 2 state police vehicles, but instead of coming inside, they positioned themselves at the exits. His phone immediately lit up with an incoming call from a blocked number. "You made a mistake," a woman's voice said when he answered. Calm, professional, American accent with maybe a hint of something else underneath. "We offered you easy money for a simple delivery. Now things get complicated. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. McCade, please don't insult my intelligence. Deputy Colton is in the parking lot with backup. You called him. That tells me you know exactly what's happening." The woman paused. "You have two choices. Walk out now, get in your truck, and drive away. We'll handle the police and you'll never hear from us again. Or stay there, get arrested with whatever's in that box, and spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Your choice. You're threatening me? I'm offering you an exit. The same exit we offered Miguel Reyes. He chose poorly." Before Harlan could respond, the line went dead. Through the window, he could see Colton getting out of his car, hand resting on his service weapon. But there was also movement in the parking lot. Figures emerging from between the parked trucks surrounding the police vehicles. Not aggressively, just present. A silent reminder that the badge didn't mean as much out here as it should. Colton entered the truck stop alone, his backup remaining outside in an increasingly tense standoff with the mysterious figures who had materialized from the shadows. The deputy's face was grim as he slid into the booth across from Harlan. "We've got a problem," he said quietly. "Those men out there, I don't know who they work for, but they're not local muscle. Professional contractors, probably military trained. My backup's requesting additional units, but out here..." He shrugged, the gesture saying everything about how thin law enforcement was spread along the border. "A woman called," Harlan said. "Told me Reyes was offered the same choice I'm getting. Drive away or face the consequences." Colton's expression darkened. "Della Rios. You know her?" "Of her. Never met her personally and hope I never do. She's what you might call a logistics specialist for some very bad people. If she's involved, this is bigger than I thought." He glanced toward the parking lot. "Those boxes that mysteriously appear in trailers? They're usually one of three things: drugs heading north, cash heading south, or other things." "Other things?" "Weapons, information. Sometimes people, but not the kind looking for a better life, the kind with specific skills and specific targets." Colton rubbed his face, looking older than his years. Reyes thought he was hauling weapons. He was wrong. What was it? Documents, hard drives, the kind of information that could destroy careers, maybe topple governments. At least, that's what my sources suggest. Someone's moving evidence out of Mexico, but not through official channels. Harlan's phone buzzed. Another text. 5 minutes to decide. "They're getting impatient," he said, showing Colton the message. The deputy was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing options. "Mr. McCade, I'm about to suggest something that goes against every oath I've taken as a law enforcement officer. But sometimes the system is so broken that working within it just gets good people killed." He leaned closer. "Take the box. Deliver it. But we're going to follow you and we're going to see where it goes. You want me to complete the delivery? I want you to survive this. And right now, that means playing along. But we need to know where this pipeline leads. Reyes died trying to find out. Maybe we can finish what he started. And if they figure out I'm working with you, then we're both dead men." Colton pulled out a small device, sliding it across the table. "GPS tracker, military grade, shielded from detection. Hide it in the box if you can. If not, just having it on you will help us follow." He stood. "I'm going to walk out of here and tell my backup we got bad information, that there's nothing here. The moment we leave, you get in your truck and drive. Follow their instructions exactly." "What about the money they offered?" "Take it. Don't taking it would be suspicious. We'll deal with that later." Colton paused at the door. "McCade, I know this isn't what you signed up for, but right now, you're the only lead we have on an operation that's been running for years. Reyes would want us to see this through." Colton left, and Harlan watched through the window as the deputy gathered his backup and they departed, leaving the mysterious figures to melt back into the shadows. His phone rang immediately. Smart choice, Della Rios's voice said. Drive to San Antonio. Tomorrow morning, park at the Flying J off I-35. Leave the trailer unlocked. Someone will retrieve the package. After that, forget this ever happened. That's it? That's it. The money will be in your account by midnight. Consider it compensation for your discretion. The line went dead. Harlan stood, left cash on the table, and walked to his truck. The parking lot was empty now except for the usual collection of big rigs. No sign of the men who'd been there minutes before. Even knowing they were probably still watching, he couldn't spot them. He climbed into his cab and started the engine, pulling out onto Highway 83 northbound. In his pocket, the GPS tracker Colton had given him felt like it weighed 100 pounds. As soon as he was a few miles from the truck stop, he pulled over and climbed into the trailer. The box was still there, innocuous in its plainness. He carefully peeled back a corner of tape, just enough to slip the tracker inside, then resealed it. Whatever was in this box, wherever it was going, Colton would know. The drive to San Antonio took 4 hours. Harlan kept to the speed limit, stopped at the mandatory weigh station, did everything exactly as he normally would. The inspector at the weigh station didn't even look at his cargo, just waved him through with a bored expression. Either he hadn't been told to look for anything, or he'd been told specifically not to look. By the time he reached San Antonio, it was past 2 a.m. The Flying J truck stop was busy even at that hour, a constant flow of vehicles moving through the border city. Harlan parked in the back row as instructed, unhitched his trailer, and moved his truck to a different spot. He sat in his cab for an hour, watching, but saw nothing suspicious. Finally, exhaustion overtook paranoia, and he crawled into his sleeper berth. He woke to sunlight and the sound of his phone ringing. Unknown number. The delivery was satisfactory, Della Rios said without preamble. Check your account. Harlan pulled up his banking app. There it was, a deposit of exactly $50,000 from a company called Desert Logistics, LLC. It looked completely legitimate, even had taxes already withheld. We may have more work for you in the future, Della continued. Same arrangement. You'll know when you see it. I don't want, Mr. McCade, you're already involved. The only question is whether you're an asset or a liability. Assets get paid, liabilities disappear. Which would you prefer to be? She hung up before he could respond. Harlan sat in his truck, staring at the money in his account. Blood money, probably. Payment for helping move something that would likely hurt people. But refusing it now wouldn't undo what he'd already done. His phone buzzed with a text from Colton. Package retrieved. Following. Stay clear. So the deputy was tracking whoever had picked up the box. Good. Maybe something positive would come from this. Harlan decided to deadhead back to Houston. Get away from San Antonio and the border for a while. But first, he needed to check his trailer, make sure nothing else had been planted there. The trailer was clean, except for the produce he'd been hauling, now needing to be delivered to a distribution center across town. He made the delivery, got his paperwork signed, and was hooking up to an empty trailer for the trip home when he noticed her. A woman standing by a black SUV, watching him. Hispanic, maybe 40, professional dress that looked out of place at a warehouse. When she saw him looking, she walked over. Mr. McCade? I'm Della Rios. I thought we should meet face to face. Harlan's hand instinctively moved toward the tire iron he kept beside his seat, but Della raised her hands peacefully. I'm not here to threaten you, just to talk. About what? About Miguel Reyes, about Deputy Colton, about the tracker you put in that box. Harlan's blood ran cold. They knew. Of course they knew. Relax, Della said, actually smiling. If I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The tracker was expected. Colton's involvement was expected. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. I don't understand. Miguel Reyes was a good man, but he was also naive. He thought he could gather evidence, build a case, bring down our operation through legal channels. He didn't understand that we own those channels. She paused. We offered him the same deal we offered you. Drive, get paid, forget. He chose to be a hero instead. You killed him. We didn't have to. His heroics got him killed. There's a difference. Della pulled out a tablet, showing him a news article. 3 days ago, a body was found in the desert near Eagle Pass, identified as Miguel Reyes. Official cause of death, dehydration. He was trying to cross the desert on foot, probably heading for Mexico. That's not what happened, isn't it? He discovered what he was really hauling, panicked, abandoned his truck, and tried to run. Made it about 10 miles before the desert claimed him. Tragic, but not uncommon out here. What was he hauling? Della studied him for a moment. The same thing you just delivered, evidence. But not the kind Colton thinks. We're not moving drugs or weapons, Mr. McCade. We're moving proof of corruption. Documents, recordings, financial records, all the evidence of who's been bought and who's been paid on both sides of the border. Why would criminals move evidence of their own crimes? Because we're not the criminals. We're the cleanup crew. Her smile was cold. When someone in power becomes a liability, when they know too much or demand too much, this evidence surfaces. They're arrested, tried, convicted. Everyone celebrates another corrupt official going down, never realizing it's just house cleaning, removing the ones who've become too greedy or too obvious. And Colton is about to become a hero. The tracker will lead him to a warehouse full of evidence against 3 very corrupt officials in the DEA. He'll get the credit, probably a promotion. Meanwhile, the real operation continues, now with 3 fewer liabilities to worry about. Harlan felt sick. So, I helped you? You helped everyone. The bad guys go to jail, the good guy gets rewarded, and the system keeps functioning. That's what we do, Mr. McCade. We maintain balance. Too much corruption and the system collapses. Too little and there's no profit. We keep things manageable. And if I refuse to help again, then next time you won't get a warning. The package will just appear, and if you don't deliver it, you'll disappear, just like the others who thought they could fight us. She handed him a business card, blank except for a phone number. But if you're smart, you'll see this for what it is, an opportunity. $50,000 for one night's work. How many runs would you have to make to earn that legally? She walked back to her SUV and drove away, leaving Harlan standing in the warehouse lot, holding the card. His phone buzzed. Colton, texting that they'd found the warehouse, that it was a goldmine of evidence, that arrests were imminent. The deputy had no idea he was being played. That night, Harlan sat in his apartment in Houston, watching the news. Sure enough, there was Colton on screen, standing beside federal agents as they announced the arrest of 3 DEA officials on corruption charges. The evidence had come from an anonymous source, they said, but Deputy Colton's quick action had secured it before it could disappear. He was being hailed as an incorruptible hero, one of the few honest cops left on the border. Harlan turned off the TV and looked at the blank business card Della had given him. He could throw it away, pretend this never happened, but he knew they'd find him again when they needed him. And the $50,000 in his account was real, more money than he'd ever had at one time. His phone rang. Colton. "McCade, you see the news? We got them. 3 major players in the corruption network, all going down thanks to that package you delivered." "That's great, Deputy. Listen, I wanted to thank you, and to warn you, These people, they're not going to give up. There will be retaliation. You need to be careful. I will be. And McCade, if they contact you again, you call me immediately. We're building a case, and every piece of evidence helps." Harlan agreed and hung up, knowing he would never call Colton about this again. The deputy was a good man, but he was swimming in waters too deep and dark for him to understand. They were all just pieces being moved around a board by players they'd never see. 3 weeks passed before they contacted him again. 3 weeks of normal runs, normal pay, normal life. Harlan had almost convinced himself the whole thing had been a one-time occurrence, that maybe they'd found another driver to be their unwitting mule. The $50,000 still sat in his account, untouched. He couldn't bring himself to spend it, but he couldn't bring himself to give it away either. He was hauling cattle feed from Corpus Christi to a ranch near Del Rio when he stopped for fuel in Uvalde. It was late afternoon, the kind of brutal August heat that made the asphalt shimmer like water. When he returned from paying for the diesel, there was someone sitting in his passenger seat. Not Della Rios. A man this time, younger, maybe 30, with the kind of forgettable face that would disappear in a crowd. He was reading Harlan's logbook like it was a newspaper, completely at ease. "Mr. McCade," he said, without looking up. "You're behind schedule. Who the hell are you?" "Someone who needs a package delivered. Check your trailer when you get to Del Rio. Same arrangement as before." He set down the logbook and opened the door to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Deputy Colton has been asking questions about you. Seems he thinks you might be more involved than you let on. You might want to handle that." Then he was gone, vanishing into the heat haze between the trucks. Harlan sat there, engine idling, air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the Texas sun. Colton suspected him. Of course he did. The deputy wasn't stupid. One miraculous tip might be luck, but if packages kept appearing. He drove to Del Rio, trying not to think about what might be waiting in his trailer. When he arrived at the ranch and opened the doors to unload the feed, there it was. Another box, identical to the first, tucked behind the pallets. His phone immediately buzzed with instructions. Drive to El Paso, park at the Love's travel stop off I-10, leave the trailer unlocked. This time he didn't call Colton, didn't plant a tracker, just drove. But as he headed west on I-10, he noticed he was being followed. A white pickup truck, maintaining perfect distance, never passing, never falling back. It stayed with him for 50 miles before his phone rang. "Pull over at the next rest area." Colton's voice, tight with anger. Harlan considered ignoring him, just driving on, but he knew that would only make things worse. He pulled into the rest area near Fort Stockton, the same one where Buck Rollins had encountered his own nightmare years before, though Harlan didn't know that story. Colton was out of his truck before Harlan had even set his brakes, striding over with barely controlled fury. "Open the trailer," he commanded. "I can't do that. It's sealed cargo. Open it, or I'll get a warrant." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you've been in contact with known smugglers, that you've received large cash payments from shell companies, and that Miguel Reyes's blood was found in your trailer." Colton's hand rested on his service weapon. "Yeah, we processed your truck that night in Cotula. Found traces of blood that match Reyes. So either you open that trailer voluntarily, or I arrest you for murder." It was a bluff. Had to be. The trailer had been clean, but Harlan couldn't be sure, and Colton looked ready to make good on his threat. He climbed out and walked to the back of the trailer, breaking the seal and opening the doors. The box sat there, innocuous as before. Colton climbed up and examined it, taking photos, checking for any identifying marks. "What's in it?" he asked. "I don't know." "Don't lie to me, McCade. you're working with them. The payment hit your account 3 weeks ago. I've been monitoring your finances. That's illegal without a warrant. So is smuggling. Colton pulled out a knife, cutting through the tape on the box. Inside were files, hundreds of them, and what looked like hard drives. The deputy pulled out one of the files, scanning through it. His face went pale. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. These are witness statements, protected witness statements from the Marshal Service." He looked up at Harlan. "Do you have any idea what this is? These are people in witness protection, people who testified against the cartels. Names, locations, new identities." Harlan felt sick. "I didn't know. If this gets to the cartels, dozens of people die. Families, children." Colton pulled out his phone, started to dial, then stopped. His expression changed from anger to calculation. "Wait, why would they move this through you? They have to know I'm watching." That's when they both heard it. Vehicles approaching fast, no sirens, just the roar of engines. 3 black SUVs burst into the rest area, surrounding them. Men in tactical gear emerged, weapons drawn but not aimed, not threatening, just present. One of them, clearly the leader, approached with his hands visible. "Deputy Colton, Mr. McCade, I'm Agent Torres with the DEA. We need to talk." "DEA my ass," Colton said, hand on his weapon. "I know every DEA agent in this region." Torres smiled. "No, you know every official DEA agent. Some of us work in a different capacity." He gestured to the box. "That information is bait, Deputy. We've been tracking a leak in the Marshal Service for 2 years. Someone's been selling witness locations to the cartels. We needed to see who would come for this. So, this is all a setup?" "Everything's a setup down here," Torres replied. "The question is, who's setting up whom? Mr. McCade here has been very helpful, whether he knows it or not. Every package he delivers helps us map the network, identify the players. He's innocent? Nobody's innocent, but he's useful." Torres looked at Harlan. "You're going to complete this delivery. We'll be watching. When someone comes for the box, we'll know who the leak is. And if I refuse, then Deputy Colton here arrests you for trafficking, and you spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Your choice." It wasn't a choice at all. Harlan nodded, and Torres's team began repacking the box, resealing it perfectly. "Deputy, you're going to drive away now," Torres said to Colton. "Go back to your regular patrol, file a report saying you found nothing. If you interfere with this operation, I'll make sure every cartel in Mexico knows you've been investigating them. How long do you think you'd last?" Colton's face was red with rage, but he nodded stiffly. As he walked back to his truck, he paused beside Harlan. "They're all using you," he said quietly. "Dela Rios, Torres, all of them. You're just a pawn in their games. Get out while you can." Then he drove away, leaving Harlan alone with Torres and his team. "He's right, you know," Torres said conversationally. "You are being used. But pawns sometimes survive to the end of the game, even become queens. Play this right, and you might come out ahead. And Dela Rios is exactly who she said she is, a logistics specialist maintaining balance. We know about her operation. Sometimes we shut parts of it down. Sometimes we let it run. It's all about the bigger picture." They left, and Harlan continued to El Paso alone, his mind churning. He was trapped between multiple forces, none of which cared if he lived or died as long as he served their purposes. The box in his trailer might save lives or end them, might catch a traitor or protect one. He had no way of knowing which side was really the right one, or if there even was a right side. He made the delivery in El Paso, parking at the Loves and walking away as instructed. Within an hour, his phone buzzed with another $50,000 deposit. Blood money or hero's pay. He couldn't tell anymore. That night, he sat in a motel room watching the news. No mention of arrests, no breaking news about saved witnesses or captured traitors. Whatever had happened with that box of files, it wasn't making headlines. Maybe it never would. His phone rang. Della Rios. "You did well today, Mr. McCade. Even with the complications. You knew Colton would intercept me. We knew everything. Colton, Torres, the fake files, all of it was anticipated. The real package was delivered 2 days ago by another driver. You were the distraction." "Then why?" "Because now Torres thinks he's tracking us. Colton thinks he's uncovered a conspiracy. Everyone's looking at you while the real work continues elsewhere. You're valuable precisely because everyone's watching you. I want out. No, you don't. You want to keep driving, keep earning, keep your family safe. And you will, as long as you keep delivering what we need delivered." Her tone softened slightly. "This isn't forever, Mr. McCade. A few more runs, maybe a year, and we'll find someone else. You can retire early, blame a bad back or whatever truckers blame when they quit. But for now, you're needed." She hung up, and Harlan threw his phone against the wall, watching it shatter. It didn't matter, they'd find him anyway. They always did. The next morning, he bought a new phone and found a message already waiting. Coordinates for his next pickup. Another promise of payment. Another link in a chain he couldn't break. 6 months into his involuntary career as a smuggler, Harlan had developed a routine. Pick up his legitimate load, drive the route, find the package that mysteriously appeared, deliver it as instructed, collect his payment. He'd made 8 runs, earning $400,000 that sat in various accounts, untouched and poisonous. He'd stopped trying to figure out what he was hauling or which side was using him at any given moment. Torres, Della Rios, mysterious others, they all blurred together into a single force that owned him. Deputy Colton had stopped calling after the 3rd run. Either he'd given up or been warned off. Harlan hoped the man was smart enough to stay away. Too many people who got close to this operation ended up like Miguel Reyes, dead in the desert with a convenient story to explain their disappearance. It was a cold February morning when everything changed. Harlan was hauling electronics from Dallas to Brownsville, a routine run he'd made dozens of times. But when he stopped for coffee in 3 Rivers, he found Della Rios sitting in his truck again, looking older, more tired than he'd ever seen her. "This is your last run," she said without preamble. "You said that 6 months ago. I know, but things have changed. The balance we maintained has been disrupted. There's going to be a war, Mr. McCade. Not the kind with armies and flags, but the kind fought in shadows with bodies that never get identified. We're pulling out." "Who's we exactly?" For the first time, Della gave him a straight answer. "We're nobody, that's the point. Not government, not cartel, not corporation. We're the space between. The people who keep all sides from destroying each other completely. But that space is closing. Choose a side or get crushed between them. Those are the only options now." She handed him an envelope, thick with cash. "There's 100,000 there. Severance pay. Take it and disappear. Change your name, move to another state, never drive commercially again. Forget you ever knew us. That's it? Just walk away? If you're smart, yes. But first, you need to complete one final delivery, not for us, for yourself." She pulled out a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Every run you made, what you carried, who received it. Names, dates, photos, Agent Torres, his real handlers, the people who killed Miguel Reyes, everything. Why give this to me? Because someone needs to survive with the truth, and you're the only one who stayed neutral enough to live. Don't use it unless you have to. Think of it as insurance." She opened the door to leave, then paused. "The package for this run, it's different. When you find it, don't deliver it. Dump it in the desert and run. Trust me on this." Then she was gone, leaving Harlan with the envelope of cash and the flash drive. He sat there in the cold morning air, knowing he was at another crossroads. He could take the money and run, try to disappear like she suggested. Or he could finish this, find out what the final package was, maybe understand what he'd been part of all these months. He drove to Brownsville, made his legitimate delivery, and then checked his trailer. The package was there, but Della had been right. It was different, larger, heavier, and it was making a sound. A soft, rhythmic thumping. A heartbeat. Harlan's hands shook as he cut open the box. Inside, unconscious but breathing, was Deputy Ephraim Colton. He was zip-tied, gagged, but alive. A note was pinned to his shirt. "Deliver to coordinates provided or both die." His phone buzzed with GPS coordinates. A location deep in the desert near the border. The kind of place where bodies were never found. Someone wanted Colton dead and wanted Harlan to be the delivery man. He cut Colton's bonds and gently slapped his face until the deputy's eyes fluttered open. It took a moment for recognition and understanding to dawn. "McCade? Where are we?" "My trailer. Someone boxed you up for delivery to what I'm guessing is your execution. We need to get out of here." Colton struggled to sit up, clearly drugged but fighting through it. "It was Torres. He came to my house, said he had evidence about the network. Next thing I know, I'm waking up here. Torres works for the government. Torres works for whoever pays him. I've been investigating. He's been playing all sides. DEA, cartels, De La Rios's people. He's the one who killed Reyes when Miguel figured out Torres was dirty." Harlan helped Colton out of the trailer and into his truck cab. "Della warned me not to make this delivery." "De La Rios? She's part of this?" "She was. Said she's getting out, that a war's coming." Harlan showed him the flash drive. "She gave me this, said it has everything." Colton plugged it into Harlan's laptop, scanning through files. His expression grew increasingly grim. Jesus, this implicates half the law enforcement in South Texas. Judges, prosecutors, federal agents. McCade, this is evidence of a conspiracy that goes all the way to Washington. So, what do we do with it? Before Colton could answer, Harlan's phone rang. "Torres. Mr. McCade, you're late for your delivery. The package was damaged in transit." There was a pause. "I see. That's unfortunate. Where are you?" "Still in Brownsville. Stay there. I'm coming to you." The line went dead. Colton and Harlan looked at each other. "He's going to kill us both," Colton said. "Probably, unless we move first." Harlan pulled out the blank business card Della had given him months ago and dialed the number. It rang once. "Yes? This is McCade. Torres is coming for us. We have the drive." "Where are you?" Harlan gave her the address. "Be ready to move in 15 minutes. And McCade? Trust nobody else from now on, not even me." They waited in tense silence, Colton checking his service weapon, Harlan gripping a tire iron. But when the vehicles arrived, they weren't Torres's black SUVs or Della's discreet sedans. They were Texas Rangers, a full tactical team. The lead ranger, a woman named Captain Sarah Vance, approached carefully. "Deputy Colton, Mr. McCade, we've been monitoring this situation for 3 years. Miss Rios contacted us, said you had evidence we need. How do we know you're not part of it?" Colton challenged. Vance smiled grimly. You don't. But in about 5 minutes, Agent Torres and his team are going to arrive expecting to find you both ready for execution. You can trust us, or trust them, your choice. As if on cue, they heard engines in the distance, multiple vehicles coming fast. Decide now, Vance said. Colton and Harlan exchanged glances. Then Colton handed over the flash drive. Everything's on there. Good. Now get down and stay down. This is about to get messy. What followed was something out of a war zone. Torres's team arrived in force, but the Rangers were ready. The firefight was brief but intense, ending with Torres and 6 of his men in custody, 2 dead and 1 escaped into the desert. When it was over, Vance helped them up. You're both going into protective custody until this is sorted out. There are a lot of people who won't want you testifying about what you've seen. What about Della Rios? Harlan asked. Gone. Probably out of the country by now. Smart woman. She saw this coming and got out. Vance looked at the flash drive. This evidence will take down a lot of powerful people. You 2 are heroes, whether you meant to be or not. Heroes. Harlan almost laughed. He'd been a drug mule, a coward, a man who'd taken blood money rather than risk his own life. Some hero. The trials took 2 years. Harlan and Colton testified in closed sessions, their identities protected, their locations secret. One by one, the corrupt officials fell. Judges, agents, police chiefs, even a congressman. The network Della Rios had described, the one that maintained balance through controlled corruption, collapsed entirely. But she'd been right about the war. With the old system gone, chaos erupted along the border. Cartels fought for territory previously divided by agreement. Law enforcement, purged of corrupt elements, was undermanned and overwhelmed. The death toll mounted daily. Harlan watched it all from a small town in Montana where the Marshal Service had relocated him. New name, new life, new job working at a hardware store. The money he'd earned from his smuggling runs had been seized as evidence. He didn't miss it. One day, 3 years after that final run, he received a postcard. No return address, postmarked from Argentina. It was a picture of a sunset over the Pampas. On the back, in familiar handwriting, the balance will return. It always does. DR. He burned the postcard but kept thinking about its message. Della Rios was right, of course. Someone would eventually fill the vacuum, create new networks, establish new balances of power and corruption. The game would continue with new players, and somewhere, another trucker would find a mysterious package in their trailer, face the same impossible choices Harlan had faced. Deputy Colton, now Sheriff Colton of a small county in Wyoming, also relocated for his safety, called occasionally. They'd share updates on the trials, the convictions, the ongoing chaos at the border. Neither of them talked about the fact that their testimony had ultimately made things worse, that breaking the corrupt system had unleashed something far more violent. Do you regret it? Colton asked during one such call. Which part? Taking their money? Helping them? Exposing them? All of it. Harlan thought about Miguel Reyes, dead in the desert for trying to do the right thing. About Della Rios, who'd maintained evil to prevent greater evil. About Torres, who'd played every side until he'd run out of moves. About himself, caught in the middle, just trying to survive. I regret getting in that truck 20 years ago, he finally said. Should have learned a different trade. Maybe been an accountant. Colton laughed, but it was hollow. They both knew the truth. In a world where the lines between right and wrong were drawn in sand and constantly shifting, survival itself was a kind of victory. They'd survived. That had to count for something. But late at night, when the Montana wind howled outside his small apartment, Harlan would think about those South Texas highways. Somewhere down there, trucks were rolling through the darkness, carrying loads, both legal and illegal. Drivers making choices that would haunt them forever. He'd dream about Miguel Reyes, about empty trucks with open doors, about packages that appeared from nowhere and disappeared into darkness. He'd wake with the taste of desert dust in his mouth and the certainty that he'd never truly escaped. The border had followed him north, lived in his nightmares, reminded him daily that some roads, once traveled, could never be untraveled. The final truth was simpler and more terrible than any conspiracy. Everyone was guilty of something. Everyone had taken money, looked away, made compromises. The only difference between heroes and villains was who got to write the final report. Harlan McCade, or whatever his name was now, had been both hero and villain, sometimes in the same day. He'd saved lives and destroyed them, exposed truth and delivered lies, upheld the law and broken it. He was, in the end, just another American trucker who'd driven too close to the border between right and wrong and discovered there was no border at all, just an endless gray highway stretching into darkness, where every mile marker looked the same, and every destination was just another beginning. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when Buck Rollins pulled his 18-wheeler onto Interstate 10, heading west through the desolate stretches of West Texas. After 23 years behind the wheel, the 51-year-old trucker had developed a preference for these night runs through the Chihuahuan desert. The traffic was minimal. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, and the solitude gave him time to think. His cargo tonight was nothing special, 42,000 pounds of construction materials bound for El Paso from Houston. The kind of load that paid the bills but didn't require any special handling or security concerns. The dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. when Buck passed through Fort Stockton, the last major town he'd see for the next 160 miles. He topped off his fuel tank at the pilot station on the outskirts, grabbed a fresh thermos of coffee, and made his mandatory electronic log entry before getting back on the road. The weather was perfect for a desert run. Clear skies, no wind to speak of, and temperatures that had dropped from the day's punishing 98 degrees to a comfortable 72. Buck settled into his seat, adjusted his mirrors one final time, and merged back onto the interstate. The CB radio crackled occasionally with chatter from other truckers, mostly complaining about construction delays near Van Horn or warning about speed traps just past the Pecos County line. Buck kept the volume low, just loud enough to catch anything important, but not so loud as to interrupt the country music streaming from his phone through the cab's speakers. George Strait's voice filled the space, singing about Amarillo skies and West Texas towns, the perfect soundtrack for the long haul ahead. It was around 11:15 p.m., approximately 60 miles west of Fort Stockton, when Buck first noticed the lights in his side mirror. A convoy of vehicles, maybe 4 or 5, maintaining perfect spacing as they moved along the highway behind him. Nothing unusual in itself. Plenty of people traveled in groups through these remote stretches, especially at night. But something about their formation caught his attention. They were moving too slowly for normal traffic, maintaining maybe 50 miles per hour in a 75 zone. And the spacing between vehicles was too precise, too deliberate. Military convoys moved like that, Buck thought. But these weren't military vehicles. From what he could make out in the darkness, they appeared to be a mix of SUVs and covered trucks. Buck eased off the accelerator slightly, dropping his speed to 65, figuring the convoy would pass him soon enough. But they matched his speed, maintaining the same distance behind him. When he gradually increased back to 70, they did the same. The hair on the back of his neck began to prickle with unease. In all his years driving these routes, he'd developed a sixth sense for trouble, And right now, that sense was screaming at him that something wasn't right. The convoy followed him for another 20 miles, never gaining, never falling back, just maintaining that steady, unsettling presence in his mirrors. Buck reached for his CB radio, switching to Channel 19, the unofficial truckers' channel. Breaker 19, this is dusty roads westbound on I-10 near mile marker 320. Anybody else seeing this convoy running slow out here? Over. Static filled the cab for a moment before a voice crackled back. Dusty roads, this is Night Owl, eastbound at marker 340. Passed them about 10 minutes ago. Strange bunch, running dark with just their parking lights. Couldn't see inside any of the vehicles, gave me the creeps, over. Running dark with parking lights only. That detail sent a chill through Buck. Why would anyone drive through the desert at night without proper headlights unless they didn't want to be clearly seen? He glanced at his side mirror again. Now that Night Owl mentioned it, the lights did seem dimmer than normal headlights should be. Buck's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Drug runners? Human traffickers? Or maybe just paranoid preppers heading to some compound in the desert. Whatever they were, Buck wanted no part of it. He was approaching the exit for Ranch Road 2886, a lonely two-lane that cut north into the desert toward the small town of Bakersfield, Texas. Population 327 on a good day. Buck had never taken that exit in all his years driving this route. There was nothing up there but oil fields and ranch land. But tonight, instinct told him to put some distance between himself and that convoy. He flipped his turn signal and began to decelerate, watching his mirrors carefully. The convoy's reaction was immediate and coordinated. The lead vehicle, a large black SUV, suddenly accelerated, closing the gap between them rapidly. The other vehicles followed suit, their dim lights growing brighter as they switched to full headlights, temporarily blinding Buck in the reflection. His heart hammered in his chest as he took the exit ramp faster than advisable, his trailer swaying slightly as the truck leaned into the curve. Behind him, the convoy shot past the exit without slowing, continuing west on I-10. Buck let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding and pulled onto the shoulder of Ranch Road 2886. His hands were trembling slightly as he put the truck in park and reached for his phone. No signal, of course not. Cell coverage out here was spotty at best. He grabbed the CB radio instead. Night Owl, this is Dusty Roads. You still on channel? Still here, Dusty. Everything all right? Saw you take that Bakersfield exit. Yeah, I'm good. That convoy just spooked me is all. They sped up when I exited, went on past. You know anything about groups running dark through here? There was a long pause before Night Owl responded. Dusty, I've been driving this route for 15 years. Last 3 months, I've seen groups like that maybe half a dozen times, always at night, always between Fort Stockton and Van Horn. Other drivers have seen them too. Nobody knows what they're hauling, but whatever it is, they don't want attention. Best to stay clear, friend. Buck thanked Night Owl and signed off. He sat in the darkness for a moment, engine idling, considering his options. He could wait here for 30 minutes, give the convoy time to get far ahead, then get back on I-10. Or he could take Ranch Road 2886 north to Bakersfield, then cut west on Farm Road 2023, eventually rejoining I-10 near Fort Hancock. It would add almost 2 hours to his trip, but something told him that keeping distance from that convoy was worth the delay. He was reaching for the gear shift when movement in his passenger side mirror caught his eye. A pair of headlights had appeared on Ranch Road 2886, coming from the direction of I-10. Buck's blood ran cold. Had one of the convoy vehicles doubled back? The lights grew closer, and Buck could make out the silhouette of a pickup truck, moving slowly, deliberately, as if searching for something or someone. Buck killed his running lights, leaving only the mandatory markers illuminated. The pickup continued its approach, now less than a quarter mile away. In the moonlight, Buck could see it was an older model Chevrolet, dust-covered and bearing Texas plates. It pulled onto the shoulder about 50 yards behind Buck's rig and stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened and a figure stepped out. The man was tall and lean, wearing jeans, boots, and what looked like a Western shirt. He stood beside his truck for a moment, seeming to study Buck's rig, then began walking forward with the measured, confident gait of someone who belonged out here in the desert darkness. Buck's hand moved instinctively to the tire iron he kept beside his seat. He'd never had to use it in 23 years, but there was always a first time. The man stopped about 10 feet from Buck's door and called out in a voice that carried the distinctive drawl of West Texas. "Everything all right there, driver? I saw you take the exit, kind of sudden-like." Buck cracked his window just an inch. "I'm fine, just needed a break from the road." The man nodded, his face obscured by the shadow of his hat brim. "Smart thinking. That bunch that passed through, you did right to let them go on ahead." He paused, then added, "Name's Clint Hargrove. I ranch about 15 miles north of here. Seen you trucks pulling off here more and more lately, trying to avoid them folks." "You know who they are?" Buck asked, his curiosity overcoming his caution. Clint spat tobacco juice onto the dirt. "I know enough to know that asking too many questions about them is a good way to end up as buzzard food out in the desert. They've been using the old smuggling routes through the Big Bend for months now. Border Patrol can't touch them. They never cross the actual border, just meet up with folks who do." He looked directly at Buck's mirror, knowing the driver could see him. "If I were you, I'd wait here another hour before getting back on I-10, and maybe find yourself a different route for a while." Before Buck could respond, Clint turned and walked back to his pickup. He paused at his door and called back, "Oh, and driver, if anyone asks, you never saw me, and we never had this conversation. Some things in West Texas are better left unspoken." With that, he got in his truck, started it up, and headed north on Ranch Road 2886, his taillights disappearing into the desert darkness. Buck sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. Whatever that convoy was transporting, it was clearly something that had the locals scared enough to warn strangers but not brave enough to report to authorities. He glanced at his dash clock, 11:47 p.m. His delivery wasn't due until 8 a.m. He had time to wait, time to let whatever was happening out there pass him by. But as he sat in the darkness, engine idling, something nagged at him. Clint Hargrove had known too much, had appeared too conveniently. How had he known Buck had taken the exit to avoid the convoy? Had he been watching? And that comment about the old smuggling routes, that wasn't common knowledge even among locals. Buck had the unsettling feeling that he'd just been warned off by someone who might be more involved in whatever was happening than he'd let on. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Buck was about to put the truck in gear when his CB crackled to life again. "Dusty Roads, this is Night Owl. You still out there, buddy?" Buck grabbed the mic. "Still here, Night Owl. What's your 20? "Just past Fort Hancock, but Dusty, I had to tell you. That convoy pulled off at the Border Patrol checkpoint near Sierra Blanca. But here's the weird thing. The checkpoint was closed. No agents, no lights, nothing. But that convoy went right through like they owned the place." Buck's blood ran cold. The Sierra Blanca checkpoint was one of the most active in West Texas, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For it to be closed, especially at night when drug runners were most active, was unheard of, unless someone had arranged for it to be closed. "Night Owl, get off this channel, find another route. Something's not right out here tonight." "Already planning on it, Dusty. You watch yourself." The radio went silent, and Buck made his decision. He wasn't getting back on I-10 tonight. He'd take the long way around, add the extra hours, explain to dispatch that he'd had mechanical issues if needed, because whatever was moving through West Texas tonight, whatever had the power to close Border Patrol checkpoints and had the locals running scared, Buck wanted no part of it. He put the truck in gear and headed north on Ranch Road 28A6, his headlights cutting through the darkness. In his mirrors, he thought he caught a glimpse of lights far behind him, but when he looked again, there was nothing but darkness. The desert had a way of playing tricks on your eyes, especially when your nerves were already on edge. 5 miles north, Buck noticed a set of fresh tire tracks cutting off the road into the desert, heading east toward a line of low hills. Multiple vehicles had passed this way recently, heavy ones judging by the deep impressions in the sandy shoulder. He slowed, studying the tracks in his headlights. They were recent, very recent. No wind erosion at all. Whatever had made them had passed this way within the last hour. Against his better judgment, Buck stopped the truck and grabbed his flashlight. He walked over to examine the tracks more closely. Mixed in with the tire impressions were other marks, drag marks, as if something heavy had been pulled from vehicles. The marks led off into the desert, disappearing into the darkness beyond the range of his flashlight. A sound made him freeze. Voices, carried on the still night air. They were speaking Spanish, but occasionally he caught English words. Shipment, checkpoint, morning pickup. Buck clicked off his flashlight and stood perfectly still, his heart pounding. The voices were coming from the direction of those hills, maybe half a mile away. Too close, way too close. He backed slowly toward his truck, trying not to make any noise on the gravelly ground. He'd just reached the cab when headlights appeared on the road from the north, coming fast. Buck quickly climbed into his cab and started moving, trying to look like he'd never stopped. The vehicle, another black SUV like the ones from the convoy, blazed past him heading south without slowing. But in his mirror, Buck saw its brake lights flare as it reached the spot where the tracks cut into the desert. Buck pushed the accelerator down, building speed despite the narrow road. He needed to put distance between himself and whatever operation he'd stumbled onto. His mind raced through what he'd witnessed. A convoy running dark, a mysteriously closed Border Patrol checkpoint, fresh tracks leading into the desert, voices in the darkness discussing shipments. He'd driven into the middle of something big, something organized, something that had the power to operate with apparent impunity in one of the most heavily patrolled regions of Texas. 10 miles north, the lights of Bakersfield appeared, just a handful of buildings clustered around the intersection of Ranch Road 2886 and Farm Road 2023. The town's single gas station was closed, but its lights were on, providing a welcome beacon of civilization. Buck pulled into the lot and parked under the brightest light he could find. He tried his phone again. 1 bar of signal. It would have to do. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Jeff Martinez, an old friend who worked for the Texas Department of Public Safety. Jeff answered on the 3rd ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Buck? Jesus, man, it's past midnight. What's going on?" "Jeff, I need you to listen and not ask questions. I'm at the gas station in Bakersfield, just north of I-10. I've seen something out here, convoys running dark, closed Border Patrol checkpoints, tracks leading into the desert. Something big is moving through here tonight." There was a long pause. When Jeff spoke again, his voice was fully alert and deadly serious. "Buck, are you alone?" "Yeah, but get back on the road right now. Don't stop until you reach Fort Hancock. Don't take I-10. Stay on the farm roads." "Jeff, what's going?" "Buck, please. Just trust me. There's an operation happening tonight, has been in the works for months. You've stumbled into something way above both our pay grades. Multiple agencies are involved. "I can't say more, but you need to be somewhere else when things go down." The line went dead. Buck stared at his phone, then looked around the empty gas station lot. He'd known Jeff for 15 years, had never heard that tone in his voice before. Whatever was happening out here was official, sanctioned, and probably dangerous enough that witnesses were unwelcome. He started his truck and pulled back onto Farm Road 2023, heading west toward Fort Hancock. In his mirrors, he caught sight of several sets of headlights converging on Bakersfield from different directions. He pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing the truck as fast as he dared on the narrow road. 20 minutes later, the night sky behind him lit up with flashes of light. Not explosions, but the distinctive blue and red of multiple emergency vehicles. His CB radio exploded with chatter, voices overlapping in panic and confusion. Through the chaos, he caught fragments. Convoy intercepted. Shots fired. Multiple agencies on scene. Shut down all civilian traffic. Buck turned off the CB, not wanting to hear more. He'd gotten out just in time, thanks to Jeff's warning. But as he drove through the darkness toward Fort Hancock, one thought kept nagging at him. Clint Hargrove had warned him too, had told him to stay away, to forget what he'd seen. Had Clint been part of the operation, an undercover agent, or something else entirely? The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern horizon pink when Buck finally pulled into the truck stop at Fort Hancock. He'd been driving for nearly 7 hours since leaving Houston, but it felt like days. His hands shook slightly as he filled out his logbook, carefully omitting any mention of his detour through Bakersfield or what he'd witnessed in the desert. Some things were better left unrecorded. He grabbed a few hours of sleep in his cab, but his rest was fitful, plagued by dreams of convoys moving through darkness and voices speaking in shadows. When he woke at 9 a.m., his phone had 17 missed calls from his dispatcher and 3 from Jeff Martinez. He called a dispatch first, explaining that he'd had to take a detour due to road conditions but would still make his delivery window. The lie came easily. After what he'd seen, the truth seemed far more dangerous. Jeff's voicemail was brief. Operations over. 6 agencies, 47 arrests, largest smuggling ring in Texas history. You were never there, understand? Delete this message. Buck deleted the message and tried to push the whole experience from his mind as he completed his delivery in El Paso. But as he loaded up for the return trip to Houston, he couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. The official operation might have ended with those arrests, but something about Clint Hargrove's warning still bothered him. The man had known too much, had been too prepared. 3 days later, Buck was back on I-10, making another night run through West Texas. He'd deliberately taken a different route on his last 2 trips, going north through Lubbock and Amarillo to avoid that stretch of highway. But tonight, his load was time-sensitive, and the direct route was his only option. He told himself that with the smuggling ring broken up, the danger had passed. He was wrong. It was just past 2 a.m. when he reached the exit for Ranch Road 2886 again. He wasn't planning to stop, wasn't even planning to slow down. But as he passed the exit, his headlights caught something that made his blood run cold. There, parked on the shoulder of the exit ramp, was Clint Hargrove's pickup truck. The same dust-covered Chevrolet, the same Texas plates. But the truck was empty, the driver's door standing open. Every instinct told Buck to keep driving, to pretend he hadn't seen anything. But something, maybe conscience, maybe curiosity, made him take the exit. He pulled onto the shoulder behind Clint's truck and grabbed his flashlight, leaving his engine running. The pickup was definitely Clint's. Buck recognized the distinctive dent in the tailgate. But where was the man himself? Buck swept his flashlight around the area. The desert stretched out in all directions, silvered by moonlight. No sign of Clint, but there were footprints in the sand leading away from the truck, heading into the desert toward the same hills where Buck had heard voices 3 nights ago. The prints were fresh, maybe a few hours old, and Clint hadn't been alone. There were at least 3 sets of tracks. A piece of paper tucked under the pickup's windshield wiper caught Buck's eye. He pulled it free and unfolded it, his flashlight illuminating hasty handwriting. Buck Rollins. I know you'll come back this way. They know I warned you. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Look under the driver's seat. Trust no one, especially not the ones with badges. C.H. Buck's hand trembled as he reached into Clint's truck and felt under the driver's seat. His fingers found a small package wrapped in plastic. He pulled it out. It was a flash drive and a folded map. The map showed the area around Bakersfield with various locations marked in red ink. Each mark had a date beside it, going back almost 2 years. The most recent date was 3 nights ago, the night of the convoy. He pocketed the flash drive and map, then stood beside the abandoned truck, trying to decide what to do. Call the police? But Clint had warned against trusting anyone with badges. Call Jeff? But Jeff was part of law enforcement too, and he'd been very clear about Buck forgetting what he'd seen. The decision was made for him when he heard engines in the distance. Multiple vehicles, coming fast from the north on Ranch Road 2886. Buck ran for his truck, but before he could reach it, the vehicles crested a small rise, their headlights pinning him in place. 3 SUVs, all black, all with government plates. They surrounded his truck, and men in tactical gear emerged, weapons drawn but not quite pointed at him. One man, clearly in charge, approached Buck with his hands visible but ready to reach for his sidearm if needed. "Mr. Rollins," the man said, and Buck's heart sank. They knew his name. "I'm Agent David with the DEA. We need to talk about your relationship with Clint Hargrove." "I don't have a relationship with him," Buck said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I met him once 3 nights ago, for about 2 minutes. Agent David studied him with dark, intelligent eyes. And yet, here you are at his abandoned vehicle at 2 in the morning. That's quite a coincidence. I saw the truck as I passed, thought someone might need help. Did you take anything from the vehicle?" Buck hesitated a fraction of a second too long. "No." David sighed. "Mr. Rollins, you're not a criminal, and I don't want to treat you like one. But you've stumbled into something complicated, and lying to me isn't going to help either of us." He gestured to one of his men who brought over a tablet. On the screen was thermal imaging footage showing Buck taking the package from under the seat. "Drone surveillance," David explained. "We've been watching Hargrove's truck since he disappeared 6 hours ago. Now, you can give me what you took, and we can have a civilized conversation. Or we can do this the hard way, your choice." Buck reached into his pocket and handed over the flash drive and map. David examined them briefly, then passed them to another agent. "Thank you. Now, what did Hargrove tell you 3 nights ago?" Buck recounted the brief encounter, leaving nothing out. There was no point in lying now. David listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. "Mr. Rollins," David said when Buck finished, "what do you think you witnessed 3 nights ago?" "A smuggling operation. The one that got busted." David shook his head. "That's what you were supposed to think. The operation 3 nights ago was indeed a major bust, but it was also cover for something else. The smuggling ring was real, yes, but they were being used by another group, a group that needed a very public distraction while they moved something far more valuable than drugs or people through this area." "What kind of something?" "The kind that gets people like Clint Hargrove killed when they ask too many questions." David's expression was grim. Hargrove wasn't just some rancher who happened to be in the right place. He was a former intelligence operative who retired here 15 years ago. He'd been tracking unusual activity in this area for months, feeding information to old contacts in Washington, information that certain people didn't want shared. Buck felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. So, the warning he gave me was probably genuine. He was trying to keep a civilian from getting tangled up in something deadly. Unfortunately, by warning you, he exposed himself. The people he was investigating have very long reaches and very little tolerance for interference. Who are they? David was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. Mr. Rollins, have you ever heard of Project Cadena? Buck shook his head. It's a black-budget operation run by elements within multiple agencies. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's been using existing criminal networks to transport sensitive materials. Weapons, technology, things that can't be moved through official channels without raising questions. Hargrove stumbled onto it, and now he's gone. Gone, as in dead? Gone, as in we'll probably never find a body. David, voice was matter-of-fact, but Buck could see the anger in his eyes. The flash drive you found might contain his insurance policy, evidence he compiled. We'll analyze it, but frankly, without Hargrove to authenticate it, it's just data. So, that's it? He's dead, and whoever killed him just gets away with it. David laughed bitterly. Welcome to the real world, Mr. Rollins. The people running Cadena have connections at the highest levels. The best we can do is document everything and hope that someday, someone with enough power and courage will act on it. He handed Buck a business card. This has my direct number. If anyone contacts you about what you've seen, if you notice surveillance, if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. We can't offer you official protection. This conversation never happened. But I'll do what I can to keep you safe. Why would they come after me? I don't know anything. You know Hargrove contacted you. You know about this location. You've seen our response team. That makes you a loose end, and these people don't like loose ends. David moved closer, lowering his voice. My advice? Stick to your regular routes for a while. Don't deviate. Don't investigate anything unusual, and definitely don't talk about this to anyone. Not your family, not your friends, not other truckers. As far as the world is concerned, you had mechanical trouble 3 nights ago, you fixed it, and you went on your way. That's your story. The agents packed up and left as quickly as they'd arrived, leaving Buck standing alone beside Clint's abandoned truck. The sun was starting to rise, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. It would have been beautiful if not for the circumstances. Buck got back in his truck and continued to El Paso, his mind churning. He'd driven into something that went far beyond drug smuggling or human trafficking. Government black operations, murdered intelligence operatives, secret transport networks. It was like something out of a movie, except it was happening in the real world, on the routes he drove every week. 2 weeks passed without incident. Buck stuck to his regular runs, didn't deviate from his routes, and tried to pretend that night in the desert had never happened. He almost succeeded in convincing himself it had all been some kind of misunderstanding, that David and his team had been overly dramatic. Then, Maybelle Carver walked into his life. He was at a truck stop in Van Horn, grabbing dinner at the attached diner when she sat down at his booth uninvited. She was maybe 60, with weathered skin that spoke of years in the Texas sun, gray hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and eyes that were sharp and watchful. "You're Buck Rollins," she said. It wasn't a question. Buck set down his fork. "Do I know you?" "No, but you knew my brother, Clint Hargrove." Buck's appetite vanished. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I think you're mistaken. I don't know anyone by that name." She smiled sadly. "Agent David told you to say that, didn't he? To pretend you never met Clint, never saw anything unusual. That's good advice, Mr. Rollins, but I'm not here to cause you trouble. I just need to know." Was he alive when you saw him? Buck glanced around the diner. It was nearly empty. Just a couple of other truckers absorbed in their own meals. Yes, he said quietly. He was alive. Thank you. Tears welled in her eyes. They won't tell me anything, you see. Officially, Clint never existed. 15 years of retirement erased because he asked the wrong questions. She pulled a worn envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. He left this for me, told me to give it to you if something happened to him. How did you know who I was? Clint was very thorough. He ran your plates that night, found out everything about you. Clean record, family man, 23 years driving without a serious incident. He said you were the kind of person who would do the right thing if given the chance. Buck didn't touch the envelope. Ms. Carver, I have a family. I can't get involved in whatever this is. I'm not asking you to. Just take the envelope. Read what's inside when you're somewhere safe. Then decide what to do with it. If you choose to destroy it, I'll understand. But Clint believed someone needed to know the truth, and he chose you. She stood to leave, then paused. Mr. Rollins, they killed my brother because he discovered something about Project Cadena. Something about what they're really transporting through these desert routes. He documented everything, but the flash drive you found was a decoy. The real information is in that envelope. Be very careful who you trust with it. She left, and Buck sat staring at the envelope. His rational mind told him to leave it on the table. Walk away. Forget this entire situation. But his conscience wouldn't let him. Clint Hargrove had tried to protect him, had probably died because of it. The least Buck could do was read what the man had thought was so important. He picked up the envelope and tucked it inside his jacket. The letter inside would change everything Buck thought he knew about the dark corners of West Texas and the cargo that moved through its empty highways in the dead of night. But that revelation would have to wait. As Buck left the diner, he noticed a black SUV in the parking lot. Its engine running, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. It hadn't been there when he'd arrived. He walked to his truck, fighting the urge to run. As he climbed into the cab, he caught a glimpse of the SUV's license plate in his mirror. Government plates, just like the ones on Agent David vehicles, but something told him these weren't David people. Buck started his engine and pulled out of the truck stop, the SUV following at a discreet distance. He reached for his phone, then remembered David's warning about surveillance. If they were watching him physically, they were probably monitoring his communications too. He was on his own, carrying information that had gotten at least one person killed, with unknown forces tracking his every move. The empty highway stretched out before him, and for the first time in 23 years, Buck Rollins was afraid of what might be waiting in the darkness ahead. Buck drove for 30 miles with the black SUV maintaining its distance, never falling back, never moving closer, just a constant presence in his mirrors. He'd thought about stopping at another truck stop, surrounding himself with witnesses, but something told him that wouldn't matter to whoever was in that vehicle. If they wanted to make a move, they would do it regardless of who was watching. The envelope felt like it was burning a hole in his jacket pocket. He desperately wanted to read what Clint had written, but he couldn't risk pulling over, couldn't risk showing any sign that he knew he was being followed. So he drove, maintaining a steady 68 miles per hour, just another trucker making his delivery. As he approached the lights of Fort Hancock, the SUV suddenly accelerated, closing the gap between them. Buck's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was it. Whatever was going to happen would happen now. But instead of forcing him off the road, the SUV swept past him in the left lane, its windows still too dark to see inside. It took the next exit without slowing, disappearing into the night as mysteriously as it had appeared. Buck let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Either they'd decided he wasn't a threat, or they were switching out surveillance teams. Neither option was particularly comforting. He took the second Fort Hancock exit and pulled into a well-lit 24-hour truck stop, parking his rig between two other trucks for cover. Only then did he pull out Clint's letter. The handwriting was neat and precise, the words chosen carefully. "Buck, if you're reading this, then Maybelle found you, and I'm gone. I'm sorry you got dragged into this, but someone outside the system needs to know what's happening out here. The flash drive Agent David has contains real information, but it's incomplete. Deliberately so. I knew they were watching me, knew they'd eventually come. So I gave them something to find. Something that tells part of the story, but not the dangerous part. Project Cadena isn't just about moving illegal materials through existing smuggling networks. It's about something much worse. They're transporting biological materials, weaponized pathogens developed in off-the-books labs. The kind of things that violate every treaty we've ever signed. They move them in small quantities, using the drug runners as unwitting mules. If a shipment gets intercepted, the carriers take the fall for drug smuggling, never knowing what they were really transporting. 3 months ago, one of these shipments went wrong. A container breached near Bakersfield. 7 people died, officially from contaminated drugs, but I saw the bodies. Whatever killed them, it wasn't any drug. The cleanup team that responded wasn't DEA or Border Patrol. They wore no insignia, spoke with Eastern European accents, and had equipment I've only seen in military bioweapon response units. I've documented everything: photos, shipping manifests, communication intercepts. The real evidence is hidden at my ranch. GPS coordinates are on the back of this letter. But be warned, they'll be watching the place. If you go at night, go alone, and trust no one in law enforcement. David might be clean, but his superiors aren't. I know this is a lot to ask of a stranger, but you stumbled into their operation and showed good instincts by getting out. That tells me you're smart enough to handle this. The information at my ranch needs to get to someone who can act on it. A journalist, a congressman, someone with the power and courage to expose this. One last thing. Maybelle doesn't know what I'm involved in. She thinks I'm paranoid, maybe losing my mind. Let her keep thinking that. It's safer for her. Good luck, and watch your 6. Clint. Buck read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and put it back in the envelope. Biological weapons. The government moving bioweapons through drug smuggling networks. It was insane, the kind of conspiracy theory that got people labeled as cranks. Except Clint Hargrove was dead, and government agents were following Buck, and something had killed 7 people near Bakersfield. He looked at the GPS coordinates on the back of the letter. The location was about 40 miles north of where he'd first met Clint, deep in ranch country. Going there would be stupid, potentially suicidal. But not going meant letting Clint's death be for nothing, letting whoever was running Cadena continue their operation. Buck made his decision. He'd complete his delivery in El Paso, then on the return trip, he'd make a detour. But first, he needed insurance. He pulled out his phone and took photos of both sides of the letter, then uploaded them to a cloud storage account he rarely used. If something happened to him, at least the information would survive. 3 days later, Buck was heading east from El Paso, having delivered his load without incident. It was 11 p.m. when he reached the exit for Ranch Road 2886 again. This time, there were no mysterious convoys, no abandoned trucks, just empty highway and desert darkness. He took the exit and headed north. The coordinates led him to a dirt road that branched off from the main ranch road. His truck wouldn't make it down that path, so he pulled off into a cluster of mesquite trees and continued on foot. The moon was 3/4 full, providing enough light to navigate by. He'd brought a flashlight but didn't want to use it unless absolutely necessary. The ranch house appeared after about 2 miles of walking. A modest, single-story structure with a barn and several outbuildings. No lights were visible. No vehicles in sight. The place looked abandoned, but Buck approached cautiously anyway, remembering Clint's warning about surveillance. The front door was unlocked, which immediately set off alarm bells in Buck's head. He pushed it open carefully and stepped inside. The house had been searched, thoroughly. Drawers pulled out, cushions slashed, floorboards pried up. Someone had been looking for something, and from the destruction, they hadn't found it. Buck made his way through the house, checking each room. In what had been Clint's office, he found a wall safe standing open and empty. Either Clint had cleared it out, or whoever searched the place had gotten into it. But something about the scene felt staged, too obvious. Clint had been intelligence, trained in hiding things. He wouldn't have kept crucial evidence in an obvious safe. Then Buck remembered something from his military days. Dead drops and concealment devices. Things hidden in plain sight that no one would think to check. He started examining ordinary objects more carefully. In the kitchen, he found it. A coffee can in the pantry that was heavier than it should be. The bottom twisted off, revealing a hidden compartment containing another flash drive and a small notebook. The notebook was filled with dates, locations, and chemical formulas Buck didn't understand. But the last entry, dated the day before Clint had warned him on the road, was clear enough. Shipment moving tomorrow night. Live samples. Delivery to Site 7. May God forgive us for what we've allowed to happen. Buck pocketed the items and started to leave, but a sound from outside froze him in place. Vehicles approaching. Multiple engines. No headlights. He moved to a window and peered out. 3 vehicles were converging on the house from different directions, boxing in any escape route. He was trapped. Buck's mind raced through options. He couldn't outrun them on foot, couldn't hide in the house. They'd search every inch. The barn was too obvious. That left the storm cellar he'd noticed behind the house, its doors barely visible in the moonlight. It was a risk. If they found him there, he'd be cornered. But it was better than being caught in the open. He slipped out the back door and made it to the cellar just as the vehicles stopped in front of the house. The cellar doors were old and rusty, but opened quietly enough. He descended into darkness, pulling the doors closed above him and feeling for a latch or bar to secure them from inside. His fingers found a wooden beam that could be wedged against the doors. It wouldn't stop determined entry, but it might buy him time. The cellar was small, maybe 10 feet by 12, with concrete walls and a dirt floor. By the thin light filtering through cracks in the doors, Buck could make out shelves lined with dusty canning jars and boxes. He moved to the farthest corner and crouched behind a stack of boxes, trying to control his breathing. Footsteps moved above him, through the house. Voices carried down, muffled but audible. Place has already been tossed. Hargrove must have moved everything before they got him. Check again. The old man was smart. He would have had backups, hidden caches. What about the trucker, Rollins? Surveillance lost him 3 hours ago. His rigs parked at a truck stop in Fort Hancock, but he's not in it. Buck's blood ran cold. They knew he'd given them the slip, knew he might be here. You think he came here? Possibly. Check the outbuildings. I'll scan for heat signatures. Heat signatures. They had thermal imaging equipment. The cellar might hide him from visual inspection, but if they did a thorough thermal scan, Buck noticed something odd about the wall behind him. Unlike the other 3 walls, which were solid concrete, this one had a section that looked different, newer concrete, like something had been patched. He ran his hands along it and felt a slight depression, a seam. Pushing against it, he felt it give slightly. It was a hidden door, concealed behind what looked like solid wall. Working as quietly as possible, Buck felt around the edges until he found the release mechanism. A simple latch disguised as a nail. The section of wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage that led deeper underground. Clint had built himself an escape route. Buck squeezed through the opening, pulling it closed behind him just as he heard the cellar doors rattle above. Someone was testing them. He moved down the passage, feeling his way in the total darkness. The tunnel was narrow, maybe 3 feet wide, and he had to duck to avoid hitting his head. It smelled of earth and dampness, and he tried not to think about what might be living down here. Behind him, he heard the cellar doors break open, followed by boots on the wooden steps. Clear down here, just old jars and junk. Scan it anyway. Buck kept moving, praying the tunnel would lead somewhere useful and not to a dead end. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, he saw a faint light ahead. The tunnel opened into another underground room, this one lit by battery-powered LED strips. It was Clint's real safe room: computers, communications equipment, boxes of documents, and walls covered with maps and photos. But Buck didn't have time to examine any of it. They'd eventually find the hidden door, follow the tunnel. He needed an exit, fast. Across the room, he spotted another door, this one openly visible. He pushed through it and found himself in a second tunnel that sloped upward. He followed it, moving as quickly as he could in the confined space. The tunnel emerged inside what looked like an old well house about 300 yards from the main house. Through cracks in the wooden walls, Buck could see flashlight beams sweeping the property, searching, but they were focused on the buildings, not the surrounding land. Buck waited, watching, timing the search patterns. When all the lights were pointed away from his position, he slipped out of the well house and belly-crawled through the sagebrush toward a dry wash he'd noticed on his way in. Once in the wash, he could move more quickly, using its banks as cover. He was almost clear when he heard shouting from the house. "Found something! Hidden door in the cellar!" They'd discovered the tunnel. In minutes, they'd reach the safe room, find the other tunnel, figure out where he'd gone. Buck abandoned stealth for speed, running down the wash toward where he'd left his truck. Behind him, he could hear vehicles starting up, spreading out to cut off escape routes. But Buck had one advantage. He knew exactly where he was going, while they had to guess. He reached his truck just as headlights appeared on the dirt road behind him. He jumped into the cab, started the engine, and took off down the ranch road without turning on his lights, navigating by moonlight and memory. The pursuing vehicles were gaining when Buck reached the main road. He yanked the wheel hard left, tires screaming, and floored it. His truck's powerful engine roared as he pushed it to its limits. In his mirrors, he saw the pursuit vehicles skid through the turn, losing ground. But they wouldn't give up easily. These weren't cops who had to follow procedure. These were black ops teams who answered to no one. They'd chase him until they caught him or he crashed. Then Buck remembered something, a wait station about 10 miles ahead that was always crawling with state troopers at night. They were checking for drug runners, but their presence might be enough to make his pursuers think twice. He grabbed his CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, this is Dusty Rhodes with an emergency. I'm eastbound on Ranch Road 2886 approaching the wait station. Being pursued by multiple vehicles. Request immediate assistance." The response was immediate. "Dusty Rhodes, this is Texas Highway Patrol. What's your exact location?" 5 miles west of the wait station. Doing 90 and being chased by 3 unmarked SUVs. Roger that, units responding. Do not stop until you reach the station. Buck pushed his truck harder, watching the speedometer climb past 95. The engine was screaming, the whole rig shaking with the strain, but the lights behind him were falling back. They'd heard the radio transmission, new law enforcement was responding. He roared into the wait station, where 3 patrol cars were waiting with lights flashing. The pursuing vehicles were nowhere to be seen. They'd vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. Buck brought his truck to a shaking stop and sat there, hands trembling, as officers surrounded his vehicle. The next hours were a blur of questions, statements, and reports. Buck stuck to a simple story. He'd gone to check on an old friend's ranch, found it ransacked, and was chased by unknown vehicles when he left. He said nothing about Project Cadena, biological weapons, or hidden tunnels. The flash drive and notebook were hidden in his truck's air filter housing, where no routine search would find them. They kept him at the station until dawn, then finally let him go with a warning to be more careful about wandering around abandoned properties at night. As Buck walked back to his truck, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows. Agent David. "That was incredibly stupid, Mr. Rollins," David said quietly. "You're lucky those were private contractors, not official teams, or you'd be in federal custody right now. I don't know what you're talking about." David smiled grimly. "Of course you don't. But hypothetically, if someone had recovered additional evidence from Hargrove's ranch, that evidence would need to reach the right hands. Not local law enforcement, not federal agencies. They're all potentially compromised. It would need to go to someone outside the system." He handed Buck a business card. It wasn't his government card. This one had just a name and email address. A friend at the Washington Post, someone who specializes in national security issues and isn't afraid of pushback. Hypothetically, of course. David turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Rollins. You might want to find a new route for a while. Maybe take some time off. Things are about to get very complicated in West Texas." Buck took David's advice. He called his dispatcher, claimed a family emergency, and took 2 weeks of accumulated vacation time. But he didn't go home to Houston. Instead, he rented a motel room in Las Cruces, New Mexico, close enough to monitor what was happening in West Texas, but far enough to avoid immediate danger. For 3 days, he sat on Clint's evidence, paralyzed by indecision. Sending it to the reporter David recommended could expose the conspiracy, but it could also paint a target on Buck's back. Not sending it meant living with the knowledge that biological weapons were being transported through civilian areas, that 7 people had already died, and more would likely follow. On the 4th day, the decision was made for him. The news broke on every major network simultaneously. A chemical spill near Bakersfield, Texas, had forced the evacuation of 300 residents. Hazmat teams from multiple agencies were responding. The footage showed people in full biological containment suits, military vehicles establishing a perimeter, and helicopters circling overhead. But Buck knew better. The local news might call it a chemical spill, but the response was all wrong for that. This was a bioweapon containment protocol. Another shipment had gone wrong. He opened his laptop and uploaded everything to a secure file-sharing site. Clint's letter, the notebook, the contents of both flash drives, his own written account of everything he'd witnessed. He sent the link to the Washington Post reporter with a simple message. Clint Hargrove died to get this information out. People are dying in Bakersfield right now. The truth needs to be told. Within an hour, his phone rang. The reporter, Jennifer Park, sounded simultaneously excited and terrified. "Mr. Rollins, do you understand what you've sent me?" "I understand people are dying, and someone needs to stop it. This evidence, it implicates people at the highest levels. Cabinet members, intelligence officials, military commanders. If even half of this is true, it's the biggest scandal since Iran-Contra. It's all true. Clint Hargrove was killed for collecting it. I need to verify some of this before we can publish. Can you stay available? I'll keep this phone on." The story broke 36 hours later. Not in the Washington Post, but simultaneously across multiple international news outlets. Jennifer Park had been smart. She'd shared the information with journalists in the UK, Germany, and Australia, making it impossible for any single government to suppress the story. The headlines were damning. Secret U.S. bioweapon program uses drug cartels for transport, and Texas chemical spill was weaponized pathogen breach, documents show, and black budget operation violated international treaties. Buck watched from his motel room as the story exploded. Congressional leaders called for immediate investigations. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session. 3 high-ranking officials resigned within hours of the story breaking. But Buck also noticed what wasn't happening. No one was being arrested. No one was taking real responsibility. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed quiet. Now everyone you care about is at risk." Buck's blood ran cold. His family. He immediately called his wife in Houston. "Beth, listen to me. Take the kids and go to your sister's place in Dallas, right now. Don't pack, just go." "Buck, what's wrong? You sound—" "Please, Beth, I can't explain right now, but you need to leave the house immediately. I'll call you when you're on the road." To her credit, Beth didn't argue. 20 minutes later, she called from the car. They were safe, heading north on I-45. Buck breathed a little easier, but he knew this was just the beginning. The retaliation came that night. Buck woke to the smell of smoke. His motel room was on fire, flames already consuming the curtains and spreading across the ceiling. He grabbed his keys and phone and dove through the window, rolling as he hit the parking lot. Behind him, the room exploded in flames. He ran to his truck, but as he approached, he saw something that made him freeze, a small red light blinking under the chassis. A bomb. They weren't trying to scare him anymore, they were trying to kill him. Buck backed away slowly, then ran. He made it about 50 yards before the truck exploded, the blast knocking him to the ground. His ears ringing, he struggled to his feet and kept moving. They'd be watching, waiting to confirm the kill. He needed to disappear. He hitchhiked to El Paso, using cash he'd hidden in his boots to pay a trucker to take him without asking questions. From there, he caught a bus to Dallas, constantly watching for surveillance. Every black SUV made his heart race. Every stranger who looked at him too long might be an agent. He finally reached Beth and the kids at her sister's house 3 days after the motel fire. The reunion was tearful and tense. "Buck, there are people outside," Beth whispered. "They say they're federal marshals, that we're under protective custody, but they won't say why." Buck peered through the blinds. 2 unmarked cars sat on the street, agents visible inside. But were they protection or surveillance? There was no way to know. That evening, Agent David appeared at the door. He looked exhausted, his usually crisp suit wrinkled. "Mr. Rollins, we need to talk." Buck let him in but kept his distance. "Are you here to arrest me?" "No. I'm here because the situation has spiraled beyond anyone's control. The story you leaked has triggered a purge within multiple agencies. People are disappearing, some running, some being eliminated. Project Cadena is being shut down, but not cleanly. They're destroying evidence, eliminating witnesses, including me, especially you. You're the only civilian with direct knowledge of the operation. Hargrove is dead. The other witnesses from Bakersfield have had accidents. You're the loose end they need to tie up. So, what am I supposed to do? Live in hiding forever?" David pulled out an envelope. "New identities for you and your family. New life in Canada. The Canadian government has agreed to accept you as protected witnesses in exchange for your testimony about Cadena." Buck looked at the documents. New names, new histories. Everything they'd need to disappear. "And if we don't take it, then I can't protect you. The people running Cadena have resources beyond what you can imagine. They'll wait weeks, months, maybe years, but eventually they'll find you. Buck looked at his family. His kids were scared, confused. Beth was trying to be strong, but he could see the fear in her eyes. Because of what he'd stumbled into one night in West Texas, their entire lives were being erased. "We'll take it," he said quietly. The transition happened quickly. Within 48 hours, the Rollins family ceased to exist. In their place, the Morrison family crossed the border into Canada, settling in a small town in British Columbia. Buck, now Robert Morrison, found work at a local trucking company, hauling lumber instead of construction materials. It was a different life, a smaller life, but a safe one. Or so they thought. 6 months into their new life, Buck received a package at his work. No return address, no postal markings. It had been hand-delivered. Inside was a single photo, Clint Hargrove's ranch, now completely demolished. Nothing but rubble and scorched earth. On the back, someone had written, "All traces erased. You're the last one who knows." Buck burned the photo, but the message was clear. They knew where he was. They were watching. The sword hanging over his head would never go away. 2 years passed. The Kadena scandal had faded from the headlines, replaced by new crises and controversies. A few low-level operatives had been prosecuted, but the real architects of the program had walked free. The official investigation concluded that while mistakes had been made, no laws had technically been broken. The biological materials had been classified as research samples. The deaths in Bakersfield attributed to industrial contamination. Buck tried to move on, to build a new life for his family. But every time he got behind the wheel of his truck, every time he drove at night, he remembered that convoy running dark through West Texas, Clint Hargrove's warning, the chase through the desert. He'd done the right thing by exposing Kadena, but the cost had been everything. His career, his identity, his peace of mind. Late one evening, he received a call from Jennifer Park, the reporter who'd broken the story. "Robert," she said, using his new name, "I wanted you to know. We won. Not completely, but we won. 3 more Kadena sites have been shut down. International pressure has forced new oversight protocols. What you did mattered." Did it? The people responsible are still free. Clint Hargrove is still dead. Those people in Bakersfield are still dead. But future deaths were prevented. That counts for something. After she hung up, Buck sat in his small Canadian living room, looking at his family. His kids were adapting to their new lives, making friends, learning to play hockey. Beth had found work at a local school. They were building something here, something good. Maybe that was enough. Maybe survival itself was a form of victory. But late at night, when the wind howled through the Canadian pines, Buck still thought about those West Texas highways. Somewhere out there, new convoys were probably running dark, carrying new secrets through the desert night. Other truckers were passing them, feeling that same chill of unease, making the choice to look away or investigate. Buck hoped they'd choose to look away. The truth, he'd learned, came with a price that no one should have to pay. The official record would show that Project Kadena was terminated in 2023, following a joint congressional investigation. What the record wouldn't show was the human cost, the lives destroyed, the families relocated, the witnesses who vanished. It wouldn't show Buck Rollins, the trucker, who'd simply been doing his job one night and stumbled into a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. In the end, Buck's story became another secret buried in the West Texas desert, known only to a few and believed by fewer. But for those who drive those lonely highways at night, who see convoys running dark and choose to take another route, the legend persists. They tell each other about the trucker who saw too much, who tried to do the right thing, who paid the ultimate price for the truth. And sometimes, on very clear nights when the desert moon is full, Truckers report seeing a phantom convoy on I-10 near Bakersfield. Vehicles running without lights, maintaining perfect spacing, carrying cargo that no one wants to identify. Most dismiss it as highway hypnosis, tired eyes playing tricks. But a few remember Buck Rollins and Clint Hargrove. They remember that sometimes the conspiracies are real. The government does keep terrible secrets, and the price of truth can be everything you hold dear. They remember, and they keep driving, leaving the mysteries of the desert darkness for someone else to solve. Because in West Texas, on those lonely highways where the horizon stretches forever and the night holds infinite secrets, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is keep your eyes on the road ahead and pretend you never saw anything at all. Some truths are too dangerous to know. Some secrets are better left buried in the desert, and some heroes are the ones who disappear completely, leaving only whispered stories and unanswered questions in their wake. Buck Rollins became all of these things: a truth too dangerous, a secret buried, a hero who vanished. His sacrifice saved lives, exposed corruption, and changed nothing all at once. That's the real horror of his story, not the conspiracy itself, but the realization that even when the truth comes out, the world keeps spinning, the powerful stay powerful, and the only real change is in the lives destroyed along the way. The highways of West Texas still stretch endlessly through the desert. Truckers still drive them at night. And somewhere in Canada, a man who used to be Buck Rollins watches his children grow up under different names in a different country, safe from the shadows that still haunt the roads he once called home.